Yeah. Living in this time behind enemy lines, so I got mine. I hope ya.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is, let's see, it is October 5th, 2023, and I am kind of moving forward in my next session. And just so you guys know, with this layout on how I'm doing this is basically how I did my Bible study on Zoom, if you guys care to go watch that whole series. But it's also how my book is laid out. So if you find this way of doing things intuitive, again, I'm walking you through how to understand the book of Revelation. What I'm doing, the whole snapshot, the intro snapshot on how you can get it from the rapture and the time of the rapture from the Old Testament without even looking at Jesus and all the other stuff, is just kind of like, that's just to whet your appetite and to kind of get you into how I get there systematically. But my system is simple. It's listen to your teacher. Jesus is your teacher, right? The apostles are your tutors, if you will. Jesus is the teacher, and if you don't get what you heard in class, you hire a tutor, and the tutor helps explain it to you, okay? And so that's who the apostles are. And John is kind of like, when you get to the book of Revelation, it's like, well, you've graduated now. Now you can read the master's thesis on the end times. And the idea is you have to go from Jesus to the apostles and then back into the Old Testament, because the apostles are going to draw a bunch of stuff from the Old Testament. And when you start to pick up what they're laying down in the Old Testament, then you can go forward to the book of Revelations and go, oh, the book of Revelations, and all the people who are going to line up and say, he said Revelations, not Revelation. I'm saying Revelations because I want to. There's a lot of different revelations in it. And yes, the book is called The Revelation, but there's several different revelations in it, and you need to know those lines of distinction so you don't fall into stupid camps like the pre-wrath camp, okay? It's just a really dumb camp. It's like Reformed theology. It's like Reformed theology shows up and says Roman Catholicism is bad, but they don't go back to the roots of Roman Catholicism and figure out why it got bad before they start to posit a new theory. They actually go and take a theory derivative of Roman Catholicism and say, there, we fixed it. And they totally didn't. And then they spend all their centuries after that writing systematic theologies and trying to hide the original underlying philosophical presuppositions that made Roman Catholicism Roman Catholicism. And while they spend the next 500 years going back to Roman Catholicism and not figuring out how they did it or why they did it, then you end up with Christendom 2.0, which is just a big fat forgetting why Christendom 1.0 was so bad and had crusades and murdered people and all that stuff, okay? Don't be dumb. Don't be dumb. The goal is not to be dumb. And then hopefully we'll do less killing people in the name of Jesus and calling it God's will, okay? Because he didn't come to kill people. He's coming to kill people, but he didn't come to kill people. He came to save people. And he said that several times. And if your theology leads you towards killing people to help him, it's probably not in the spirit that he was trying to convey. Because when people talked about doing that specific thing, he corrected them and said, you don't know what spirit you are of. Okay? So, let's listen to our teacher. We're going to go from Jesus and we're going to go to the apostles. But before we get to the apostles, we want to understand something very specific. Jesus pointed to a specific prophet and said, go read him. Now, there are a lot of prophets he could have pointed to. Now, he pointed to a lot of different prophets on a lot of different things, but when it comes to eschatology, he pointed to a specific prophet, and then he said, go read him. And so before we get to the Apostle Paul or Peter or John and any of these other guys, let's just take this wild assumption that this thing that Jesus said to do, that they felt the need to record in Matthew and Mark, is something they actually took the time to do. And then, before we read their Paul's letters and assume that the Holy Spirit beamed some new information into his head that he didn't beam to anybody else's head, we can actually remember that God has laid out thousands of years of precedence how he does everything by 2 or 3 witnesses, and he actually told them to go read the book of Daniel. So maybe when we get to Paul, we're not assuming he's actually coming up with stuff for the first time like the Darbyists assume. We're actually believing that Paul read Daniel, because Jesus said to read Daniel, and if Paul is an apostle sent by Jesus, he'd probably take the time to obey him himself before he advocate that you do, because Paul was smart. Okay? And assuming that Paul's smart and not dumb, we're going to go follow his footsteps, and that way when we get to statements he said, like, we know who restrains him, we're not going to pretend that Paul didn't follow a logical pathway to get there before he assumed some 3-week-old Christians knew something that he explained to them and is going to allude to when he explains something to them a second time, saying, I told you this already. Okay? So it's just being logical, it's just not being dumb, and it's just not fighting over things that actually make a lot more sense. And if you can do that with this little thing, maybe we can do it with things like, I don't know, Calvinism, or Catholicism, or figuring out why, Roman Catholicism and radical Islam are two sides of the exact same coin, and they so reflect each other. It's almost like there's an intrinsic obsession with the sun and the moon between them, that they bleed out of every pore of their culture, almost as if they're saying, yeah, we're kind of the same. We're kind of married to one another. And we know you like the fight, and we know you like teams, and so one team decided to be the sun, and one team decided to be the moon, and we call it a jihad, and they call it a crusade, and we're just going to fight forever because you guys like to fight. And red team, blue team is just how we're going to do things then. And, since you guys like false dichotomies, we're going to give you a false dichotomy, because it's almost like this wasn't about the popes or Muhammad. It was about the spirits that were trying to get us all to fight each other and kill each other from the first two siblings. And then, once we figured out that game that they're playing, maybe we can actually dialogue with each other and actually listen and actually start to get to some common ground and, some common sense, and then try to figure out what God said and what the demons said and not confuse the two. Just a thought. Okay? So, if we're going to do that, we want to listen to the master teacher and the person who rose from the dead, who actually said, hey, I know a bunch of stuff that you guys don't know because I am the truth. Okay? Anyone shows up and says, I am the truth, you either want to listen to them and do what they say or kill them. And if you kill them and they come back, then you probably want to listen to them and do what they say. Okay, so let's assume that was true. He said some stuff. And we want to start with the first things first and what he said first. And this is why I start with Luke 17. This is the first time he talks about his second coming. And if a guy says he's going to come back again, and you don't realize we killed him and then he came back to life, and then he says he's going to come back again, and then he left for a while, and a bunch of stuff that he said was going to happen happened, specifically the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, we should listen to that guy. Because all the other prophets that said stuff that was going to happen and it happened are the reason that we listen to that guy in the first place. And if that guy said a bunch of stuff is going to happen and then he's going to come back, he's probably going to come back. And if he's going to come back in a certain way and there's going to be certain preceding signs that indicate that he's coming back, we should probably want to know what those signs are. And since he said this first, we should probably want to know that before we go on to the next thing he said and try to assume that he's speaking from a vacuum when it's literally the last thing he taught before he died. Okay? You don't start with the last thing somebody's... I realize if you skip to the end of the book, you're going to get the point at the end, but you're not going to know much about the why. So you want to read the entire book. And he says Luke 17 before he gets to Luke 21, before he gets to Matthew 24, and before the apostles say things that are derivative of those things, and before he reveals Revelation some, 50 years later, and actually expounds upon those things with a bunch of spiritual metaphors and signs and allusions to Old Testament prophecies that weave the entire unfulfilled segment of biblical prophecy together and give you one big picture of how the world's going to end. And the reason that's important is because it's happening right in front of our face. And unlike all the other generations that thought it was happening in their time, we actually have the data and the information, the corrected manuscripts to know that it actually is happening in our time. We can actually validate that. And we can also share it globally, which is something that they couldn't do. And so maybe it's time we get good at doing that instead of trying to best each other in the comment section with Twitter-like comebacks. because Twitter is failing, because it's literally a machine that's full of just snappy one-liners, okay? And snappy one-liners turns out is just a good way to fight, but a bad way to dialogue, okay? So let's go to Twitter if you want Twitter, okay? If you want to be part of this, try to say something, try to communicate something that is more substantial. And if it's a question, let it be a question. If it's I think you're wrong, let it be I think you're wrong and here's why, okay? Assume that me or other people in the comment section are reading and we're actually trying to better ourselves and not just people who are trying to make fun of your team. And then maybe we can learn from you. Don't be a D-bag. Okay, anyways, what we know from Luke 17. Sometimes I forget that I made PowerPoints from this stuff and I taught it before, and this is actually more convenient than trying to do things without pictures and information that's going to help you guys process the information. I'm not a good teacher. I went to school to teach, and I just wandered around studying things that I wanted to study because I really didn't go to school to teach because I wanted to be a teacher. I went to school because I wanted to study everything, and that seemed to be the best avenue to actually make money while doing it. And then I wandered into other things and ended up technical recruiting for a while and talking to a lot of very, very, very smart people that had expertise in things that I'm not, and I still enjoy doing that. And when I realized that, I need to contribute something to this pool of information, I realized there was something there that everybody was missing. There's a couple things there that everyone was missing, and one seemed to be Heraclitus versus Parmenides' version of the Logos, which I just recently discovered. I've just been writing Heraclitus' version of the Logos since my undergrad, so 20-ish years, and then the other one was Eschatology. It's just like nobody gets this right. And I sat there for 15 years on YouTube looking for good videos on the Mid-Trib Rapture, and nobody gets this right. And I couldn't find them, so I decided that's a gap that I must be designed to fill. So I'm trying to fill it to the best of my ability. And I'm not good at it, but I'm trying to get better at it. So where was I? So in my last video, I didn't kind of give you the summary, but this is a summary that I said. So here's what we know. We know from Luke 17 that Jesus said, before the day of the Lord, there will be something like the days of the Son of Man involving miracles, but we're not to believe them or follow them, okay? So there's going to be someone like a Christ, but there's going to be a massive move, like Christ and his apostles, going around doing a bunch of miracles in the name of some guy who's not really Jesus Christ, but is pretending to be. And the point is that when Jesus actually arrives, it's going to be something that's really obvious. It's going to be like lightning in the sky, and every eye will see him. Literally every eye will see him. Literally every eye will see him. There's no secret rapture in which he comes and takes a bunch of people and everyone's like, where'd they go? And then they start inventing aliens after the fact. No, they're going to invent aliens before the fact so that when they go away, they say, where'd they go? When we know where they went, and then he's going to say, yeah, but it was aliens, and we need to all lie together and fight the aliens, as if the obvious thing from the Bible that you just saw happen wasn't really for the reason that the Bible told you it was going to happen for 2,000 years. And then we can pretend that Jesus is an alien and all try to fight him like he's the Death Star, and the New Jerusalem isn't coming here to save all the people. It's actually coming here to hurt all the people. And then we can become the people that forces it to hurt us, to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that proves that the devil's right. We don't want to do that. We want to basically know that when the Lord appears, it'll be like lightning and every eye will see him. That's why my book is called The Revelation, Every Eye Will See Him. And then we also want to know that that day that happens is when the Jews flee Jerusalem and Judea, and then that they will see one taken and one left that night. There you go. That's everything you know about when the rapture is supposed to occur from Luke 17. You already have it. I showed it to you from Isaiah 26. Now I'm showing it to you from Luke 17. I'm going to show it to you from Matthew 24. I've made numerous videos explaining Matthew 24. I'm going to do it again, but before I do, I'm going to go back to what Jesus said about Daniel, okay? So Matthew 24, I think I covered that somewhat in the last video. I said, okay, Jesus is going to make two big fat points in Matthew 24, and the rest of it is going to be exposition of Luke 21 and Luke 17, if you know what he's talking about. Now, he's going to exposit a number of other things that are going to be in his kingdom parables and various other parts of Luke, but those are the main two things in Matthew 24. And what he is going to say is, here's your big takeaways. Apostasy, wars, floods, famines, earthquakes, and plague are not the sign of the end. Okay, these things are going to happen again and again and again throughout world history, and people are going to keep saying it's the end, it's the end, it's the end. But Jesus said this is not the end. This is the end. Point 2, the abomination of desolation is the sign to flee Jerusalem. Okay, so it's a sign to flee Jerusalem. So it's not a metaphorical thing that happens in the church, because it's a sign to flee Jerusalem. Got it? Got it. Okay, so when you see the abomination of desolation, you are to flee Jerusalem and Judea, which means the abomination of desolation has to occur in Jerusalem and Judea. So anyone who's trying to tell you that the abomination of desolation is some spiritualized metaphor of something that happens outside of Jerusalem and Judea is automatically lying to you. But if you want to hone in on what the abomination of desolation is, he says it's spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So you want to go to Daniel the prophet. And then before you go to 2 Thessalonians 2 and debunk the entire theory on the pre-trib rapture, because 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 makes it impossible, well, then you want to have read Daniel, and you want to understand it also makes the pre-wrath theory possible. It makes everything but the mid-trib theory possible, because it tells you over and over and over again that the abomination of desolation happens in the midst of Daniel's 70th week. It happens at the midpoint, and we already know from reading Luke 17 that day the Jews flee Jerusalem, and that day the Lord appears, and that night they see one taken and one left. So we already know this before we get to Matthew 24. If we've read Daniel, okay? So let's go back and read Daniel. That's what this is all about, okay? Now, there's going to be 4 major takeaways. Now, before I get to those takeaways, I'm gonna explain this to you, because this is basically Jesus' summary of the end times that you get from Matthew 24, and these are again, this is a pictorial summary of the signs of his coming. Okay, again, this is not the end, and then the sign, the abomination of desolation, indicates the end. It signifies the end, and then that's going to be followed by the sign of Christ appearing in the clouds that day, the Jews fleeing Jerusalem that day, and Christ sending out his angels together, the elect, that night. Now, when you get into the nuances in the language in Matthew 24 and why people think after the tribulation means after the tribulation, and forgets that there's a tribulation mentioned earlier, and never go back to read Luke 17 and figure out that Jesus is expositing things that he said before, we want to be careful to read carefully, okay? And then we want to notice these things he says that are not at the end, and he's going to say that they come on you like birth pangs. So there's almost going to be like this seismic, slow quaking of these things that is going to build up and build up and build up. And so what you find happening from all the way back in 70 AD is going to happen in larger contractions throughout history. And throughout history, those contractions are going to build up until you finally find a more rapid set of contractions, which are going to lead towards the end. Kind of like how you're going to have, bloating and gas and false alarms throughout a pregnancy, but when you get towards the end, you're going to have contractions, and then you're going to have fast contractions, then it's like, okay, my water broke, this is for real now, okay? And my water breaking is really going to be summarized in the sun turning to darkness and the moon turning to blood and the whole earth shaking. Like, that's the big one. That's your water breaking. Okay, we're going into labor now. Okay, like, this is for real. We got to go to the hospital. The water broke. It's on now. Okay, because if the water didn't break, these are just pains or contractions, or maybe gas. Maybe it's the burrito you ate. Okay, but once the water breaks, we know, okay, it's time to go to the hospital now. Okay. And when the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood and the whole earth shakes, that's when the labor is beginning. Okay, you need to know this. And the reason you need to know this is because these fools who are into this pre-wrath theory, which hopefully I'm going to debate someone who thinks that in about 11 days, they think that's the end, and it's not. It's the beginning. So imagine, like, your wife's water broke, and you're like, "Oh, good, your water broke. The birth is over. Well, let's go home." It's like, no, you fool. We haven't had a baby yet. Okay. And so when we get to the point where the sun turns to darkness and the moon turns to blood and the whole earth quakes, and there's literally going to be a whole bunch of people dead, and World War III is happening, and nukes are going to fly, and all this stuff. You guys want to be among the people that are like, hey, we were prepared for this. We were prepared for this. It's time to go to the hospital. It's not over yet. Okay? This is the real thing. Okay? And when all the people are freaking out and crapping themselves because they realize what they thought was the end is not the end, and they're still here, and they're trying to recalibrate their brain space and try to figure out what's going on here, you want to be the ones that say, this doesn't mean that Jesus is back. This doesn't mean that Jesus is back. This doesn't mean that Jesus is back is because he told us it's going to be like lightning and every eye will see him, and that didn't happen. You want to hold on to that truth so that other people who are about to be deceived won't be deceived, and you can help them, because if not for the sake of God, even the elect would be deceived by the great delusion, but for God's sake, for the sake of his elect whom he's chosen, he's going to cut those days short. He is going to make sure you're not deceived. And then the rest of you who know Christ and have the Holy Spirit in you, well, you're going to get your heads chopped off. So you're going to be deceived, but you're not going to be destroyed by that deception. Thank God. Thank God you only get your head chopped off instead of thrown in hell for all of eternity. Thank God. Okay? But what if we could avoid getting your head chopped off? Wouldn't you wanna? I mean, wouldn't you just wanna, just because it's like, you know, let's say we don't want to get our heads chopped off. Maybe that's something we want to sign up for. And you can sign up for that. And it's simple. It's a simple equation doing this thing called obedience to watch. When he says watch that you be counted worthy to escape these things, maybe we want to watch. And if we're supposed to watch for specific things, maybe we want to know what those things are we're supposed to watch for. And when he tells you that when you see these things, look up, we want to be one of those ones looking up. Not hiding underground with our bottled water and our guns, not trying to fight the Antichrist, not trying to install the kingdom of God in our own strength, but actually watching, like ready to look up and be like, raise your hands, right? It's like a baby, like you're raising your hands when daddy gets home because you want to be picked up. And he'll pick you up if you raise your hands. But if you go and hide, he won't. Okay? Well, it's not like a baby when dad gets home because dad's not going to let a bunch of people chop your heads off. But Jesus is going to let a bunch of people chop your heads off if you're not waiting and watching and ready to say, ooh, pick me, pick me, pick me. You want to be like a who, right? You want to say, we're here, and you want to be one of those guys, so he picks you, okay? And he gave you everything you need to know to do this. So it's not some basis of having a bunch of super knowledge that you're one of the smart ones and so you figured it out. You're one of the obedient ones who read what he said very, very, very plainly and listened to him, okay? When you see these things, look up. Your redemption draws near. Watch that you be counted worthy to escape, okay? So what you're going to have is you're going to have these followed by a false peace, a false peace. And it's not that there's not going to be signs and disasters and crazy stuff happening in the world. There certainly is. I mean, there's going to be some guys who run around the world killing a third of the planet at this time. But there's going to be a realm in which there's a false priest. But there's going to be signs that are going to be disrupting that peace. And the whole point is to draw you deeper and deeper and deeper into that deception, where the fear of death, which is really driving you there in the first place, is driving you closer and closer and closer to the Antichrist, so that when he says, I'm God, worship me, it's the natural next step for those who are driven by the fear of death. And there's a lot of Christians who are still driven by the fear of death because they haven't suffered. They haven't suffered for Christ. They've actually done a very good job at avoiding suffering. They've done a great job at avoiding discomfort. And what they do is they adapt. They believe in Jesus, but they keep adapting to the times in order to have peace with everybody. And those are called lukewarm people. Okay? So when we get to Revelation, when we talk about this, we're going to talk about these 7 churches and how it gets down to these lukewarm people at the end. And there's actually metaphorical language there that's supposed to tie to the Song of Solomon that tells you that these people are going to be left behind and get their heads chopped off. It's in the Song of Solomon, chapter 5. Okay? It's going to happen. And then there's the people before them, which are the Philadelphians, and they're told specifically that they're going to be taken off before it happens, okay? So that is the line. That is the line between the Christians who are raptured and the Christians that are left behind to get their heads chopped off. And if you know your Old Testament, you'll know what Christ is alluding to, and you'll go back to those stories that sound just like that language he's using, and then you're going to read it and find out, oh, he's saying these people are going to get raptured, and these people are not. And that's how the 7 letters to the 7 churches in Revelations 3 ends. And then he's going to go into a new section of prophecies, which is going to start, and it's basically going to start explaining things that are actually going to start with Jesus' death and resurrection, because there's going to be a time in heaven where Jesus is not there. And this is not eternity, this is the third heaven. So they have time there, okay? And you're going to find that there's a time that Jesus isn't there, and then Jesus is there as a lamb as if slain. And so John is actually there in the third heaven from the point that Jesus has not yet been slain to the point that he's slain. And then as these seals are going to unfold, they're going to lead you up to the 7th seal. And the 7th seal starts the 7 trumpets. But the 6th seal ends with the sun turning to darkness and the moon turning to blood and the Spirit poured out on Israel. And this is not something that we're learning in a vacuum. This is something that is actually going to have multiple fulfillments or multiple expressions of its fulfillment. And they're going to be in Isaiah 24. They're going to be in Joel 2 and 3. And then they're actually going to be in Zechariah 12 and 13 as well. And then they're going to be in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So you have this in 4 places in the Old Testament before you get to Revelation 6. So don't just line it up with Matthew 24. Go and look at all the other prophecies that have those specific signs that are in Revelation chapter 6 and 7 and realize that this is not something you should be trying to interpret in a vacuum with your favorite Left Behind book. This is something that you need to go and understand the prophets and understand, just like you need to understand Daniel to understand the abomination of desolation. And it just so happens that Ezekiel 38, which is Zechariah is actually the last one. Ezekiel's the second to the last. He's going to talk about a 7-year period that's right after this war with the whole earth shaking. Okay? And that's Daniel's 70th week. And if you know that Ezekiel and Daniel were contemporary and that they're both meant to be merged together, you find out that he's talking about what's around the 70th week and Daniel's talking about what's in the 70th week. Ezekiel's talking about what's around the regathering of Israel into the land, and Daniel's talking about the history that leads up to that regathering into the land in that 70th week. Okay? They're meant to be read together. Because God's not going to send 2 prophets at the same time. I expect you to read one, not the other. Okay? So, anyways, this is going to be this false peace that's going to lead up to the abomination of desolation. Okay? So, what we're going to learn from Daniel the prophet, and I'm going to give you the summary, and then we're going to go through Daniel the prophet, and then I'm going to give you that summary again, okay? There will be exactly 4 Gentile kingdoms before Christ's kingdom, okay? That is the major thesis of Daniel's entire book. That is going to be the first prophecy he gets, and he gets it through the first one of those kings in that kingdom and the first of the 4. Okay, there are going to be 4 Gentile kingdoms that rule over Israel before Christ returns. And it just so happens that there's 7 total, but there's going to be 4 from the time of Daniel. So you're going to have other kingdoms that ruled over Israel. And there's going to be 7. And these are 7 mountains on which the harlot sits. Okay, but they are going to actually share in that role, because you're going to have Egypt and you're going to have Assyria kind of sharing in that role. And then you're going to have the Antichrist kingdom as kind of a separate kingdom, because his kingdom is kind of a usurper kingdom that shows up at the last minute. Okay, but these are going to be the 4 kingdoms that rule. Okay, and then the 8th is one of the 7 is going to be the Antichrist, who shows up and says, I'm in charge of everything. And Jesus starts pouring out wrath as soon as he does that. So it's kind of there, but it's not really much of a kingdom, because as soon as he says, I'm in charge, Christ shows up and says, no, you're not, and shoots him down. But then he lets him kind of, go on in some kind of amalgamation of a transcendent monster thing for 3.5 years while he pours out wrath on everybody, in case you haven't gotten to the point that God doesn't like this guy. So, Daniel, in Daniel, there's going to be 4 kingdoms before Christ's kingdom, from the point that Daniel's starting, okay? And that theme is going to dictate everything that is in Daniel, everything in Daniel, okay? Then there's going to be 2 phases that are in Christ's kingdom, and that's kind of a mystery. And that's something that's going to be in that first prophecy. And then there's going to be 2 phases to the kingdom come, and that's what we talked about in Luke 17. The kingdom comes spiritually when we're in Christ. So we're in the kingdom the moment that we're in Christ. The kingdom comes physically when Christ returns, okay? So both are true. And that's something that we should get from Adam. And I'm going to show you that in a minute, okay? So when the Lord appears, it says, in the first coming, the kingdom will spread throughout the earth spiritually. In the second coming, the kingdom will spread throughout the earth materially. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason it comes first spiritually, and then it comes materially. And so people call this already not yet, or they call it dual fulfillment. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is the reason why the spiritual comes first and the material comes second. And that goes back to Adam. Okay? Where's Adam? So the reason the times of the Gentiles are the way that they are is because this is supposed to represent a microcosm of all humanity. And all humanity is in Adam. Just like all the churches in Christ, all humanity is in Adam. And Adam was taken captive. Okay, Adam was taken captive to Satan the moment he obeyed him to do his will. Okay, and so we have a kingdom that is captive, and that is going to pre-exist the kingdom that comes spiritually. And Adam, when he was taken captive by Satan because he did his will, well, he died spiritually, and so then we're going to have the kingdom come spiritually. Okay, and then Adam died physically sometime afterward, and we're going to have the kingdom sometime afterward come materially. Okay, so he died spiritually, and then he died physically. The kingdom needs to come spiritually, and then it needs to come physically. You were born again spiritually, and you're born physically. And that order is always the way it is. And the reason that it is the way it is not just because Adam died spiritually before he died physically, but because what was spiritual pre-existed what was physical. The spiritual Adam pre-existed the physical Adam. And so Christ is the latter born, in other words, he's revealed later materially, but he pre-exists Adam spiritually. And that's a mystery, and that thread and that pattern is going to go throughout the entire Bible. And if you get that thread and you get that pattern down, when you go to read the Bible, you're going to understand things a lot better. And when you see things that seems like they have a dual fulfillment, is because the first one is meant to allude to something spiritually, and then the later one is meant to be the actual material reality of that thing. And when we get to the very, 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 very end of everything, well, the spiritual and material are going to merge and be one, because we're no longer in a sandbox where God is giving us a do-over. We're actually in eternity, and this is the real game now. Okay? And we want to get there. We want to get past tryouts, and we want to actually get to the real game. Okay? Because right now we're in tryouts, and really the tryouts are about saying, hey, if I let you guys play in the real game, like, are you going to take your turn and swing and hit the ball and run the bases and play the game by the rules? Or are you going to take the bat and go run at the pitcher the moment you miss a strike and you get embarrassed, and then you're going to go try to kill him with that bat? Because that's going to ruin the game for everybody, and we don't want that. So you're going to behave yourself before we let you in the real game. And if you can't go through this simulation and realize that you have some problems with your ego that you need to overcome, and it's called humility, we're going to have somebody die for your sins. And if that doesn't humble you, probably nothing will. So, this is your last chance. You want to humble yourself. You want to realize that somebody else died for your sins, and humble yourself. And then he'll change you. And you can go from being bound by death to be full of ego and full of reasons to prove why you're worthy of eternal life, and actually just be somebody who has eternal life and doesn't need to prove anything. And then you can start making better YouTube content. Okay? So, that's why it happens the way it happens that way. But now we want to go to Daniel, and we want to understand what Daniel's talking about so that we can walk through Daniel's... basically, there's going to be 4 major prophecies, but one of them is going to be an interpretation of a Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And those are going to lead us up to Daniel 12, where he flat out tells you in no uncertain terms that the abomination of desolation happens in the middle of the week. And you should know by this time that that's when the rapture happens, because it's going to tell you that in the same chapter. Okay? So, we're going to Daniel. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 1 is going to tell you how Daniel gets to where he is and how he saves the Magi, or how he and his friends decide not to eat the bad, unclean food that Nebuchadnezzar serves. And then chapter 2 is going to tell you how he saves the Magi. And this is very important to know because a bunch of Magi show up when Jesus is born. Why do they show up when Jesus is born? Well, their lives were saved by a guy who actually told you how many years it's going to be until Jesus is born. That's why. And there's another prophet that's in the book of Numbers, which they would have all known because everybody would have had a Pentateuch. That prophecy tells you that there's going to be a star that appears when the king is born, and you're going to have one guy who tells you when the king is going to show up, and then you're going to have get another guy that tells you that there's a star that's going to appear when the king is born, and they're going to be like, hey, there's a star that appears, and we're like 30 years shy of the king showing up, and they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. He must have been born. And they're going to go there, and they're going to go, oh, here's the king. And then people are going to try to kill the king because there's some people that are just not convinced by supernatural prophecies that there's a God that needs to be respected. And I don't know why they could believe the prophecies and still not respect the God, but that's what people are like. They always want to test the boundaries. They're like raptors like that. So anyways, Daniel 2, this is in the second reign of Nebuchadnezzar, and you always want to look at these lines when you're reading any prophets. They're going to give you timestamps on when this was. And you want to pay attention there because there's context there, okay? Daniel is going to give some prophecies that are during Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, and then other prophecies after Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom has passed, and they're in the Persian kingdom, and that is relevant to how you interpret them. I'm not going to tell you how that's relevant right now, but it is relevant. So you guys want to pay attention to these things. You want to know what prophecies were given first. And you want to also get a feel for where we are in terms of the timeline, because remember, there's going to be 70 literal years of captivity that the Jews are captive to Jerusalem, and Daniel and Ezekiel's exile is going to be kind of the start of that. And then you're going to have 70 weeks of years, which are going to be a mystical captivity to the Gentiles in general that the Jews are going to be subject to. So, he says, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. And then the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. Now, when you see the word magicians, chartom, these are actually, see, it's a horoscopist. Okay, these are actually people who are going to be diviners of things, and you're going to have conjurers, okay? You're going to have the Chaldeans are actually a tribe. The Chaldeans are descendants of Arphaxad, but they were very well known for astrology. And the Magi would have been among these people. The Magi were a philosophical tribe that lived somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere between Babylon and Persia, I think. And they're mentioned in Herodotus' history, and they would have been among these people because all these philosophers and soothsayers and magicians and stuff like that would have been in Nebuchadnezzar's court of advisors, because they tend to know a lot of stuff about history, and they tend to know a lot of stuff about the rise and fall of kings, and a lot of them claim powers of divination. And Nebuchadnezzar is from Babylon, which is where the Chaldeans are, and he is about that, okay? And then one of them is going to be Daniel. And basically, Daniel is put over the Magi after this, okay? So, basically, I don't know why the Magi are not mentioned specifically here. Oh, here we go. The wise in Babylon. So in verse 48, he's going to say he put him over all the Chachim Magian. Okay, the wise, so remember the three wise men? It says Magian. These are Magi. These are actually people from the tribe, okay? So among these people from this tribe, apparently you have people that practice all these divining arts, but they're an actual people, okay? Now, Nebuchadnezzar is going to have this dream, and he's going to say, I had this dream, and I know you guys like to make crap up and try to give me obscure answers that could go either way so that you can protect yourselves and say, well, that's what we meant was going to happen, but you misinterpreted what we said. I'm not going to suffer this crap. What I'm going to do is say, okay, I think you're full of crap, so tell me what my dream was, and I'm not even going to tell you what it is. And if you don't tell me, I'm going to kill you. And he's going to do that, and nobody's going to be able to tell him. They're like, we're going to die here. We can't BS our way out of this. And Daniel says, don't worry, I know God. I don't have to BS my way out of it. And he's going to get the image of the dream. He's going to have very similar giftings to Daniel, or to Joseph, and he is going to get the interpretation of this dream. And so he says, O king, thou, O king, sawest, he's telling what his dream was, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. Terrible. Why was it terrible? It says to slink, make afraid, dreadful, fear, terrible. Okay? So he's saying there was a terrifying vision. Okay? This is something that scared him and intimidated him. Okay? He's actually telling the king how he felt when he saw this thing. And he said, in the image, let's see. And the image's head was of fine gold, his breast and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part iron and part clay. Okay? Now, all of these elements you want to pay very careful attention to, okay? Gold, silver, brass, iron, and clay. Because these elements are going to be in Daniel's subsequent vision. And don't think that those visions and those prophecies were giving in a vacuum, okay? They're all tied to this one. So when you see a beast that has claws of brass and teeth of iron, that's going to be specific. You want to know about that. When you know this clay, you're going to want to learn some things about this clay, because actually Isaiah and Jeremiah and the generation preceding Daniel talk about clay. Okay, they talk about clay, and that's a specific reference to the Jewish people. Same thing with silver. You're going to want to know these things, because silver and gold are actually very fine materials, but they're not strong materials, whereas brass and iron are not quite as fine materials, but they're very strong materials. Okay, and you're going to find out that Nebuchadnezzar is going to be bound by brass and iron for a time. And that's going to signify something, okay? So you want to pay attention to these elements. You want to understand their properties and why their properties are the way that they are. And then you want to apply them accordingly when you see them used in other visions, by Daniel in particular, okay? But by anybody who is, drawing visions from Daniel. And then he says, thou saw till a stone was cut without hands, without hands, without hands, without hands. Why is this important? It's important for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to be denoting Christ, who came into the world, and he was born not of the will of the flesh or of the will of man. He was born of God. And without hands is a way of saying man had no part in this, okay? And he's going to talk about the Antichrist's defeat without hands. And why is that so important? Because Jesus is trying to tell you again and again and again and again, you do not establish the kingdom. Only Jesus can establish the kingdom. And that's why he's saying you're going to do it without hands. Okay? He talks about this in Micah 5. The Jews are going to try to establish the kingdom without hand. He's going to talk about this later on in Daniel 11. He's going to say, the robbers of my people are going to try to establish the vision. There's people who are always trying to make his prophecies come to pass. And he's going to say, don't be dumb. This is me. And that's why he says in the first place, without hands. Okay? You guys aren't going to do this. In fact, when he kills the Antichrist, there's not going to be any hands involved. He's going to speak a word, and the lightning bolt's going to hit him in the face, and he's toast. You don't need to fight the Antichrist, okay? Don't think about that. The Left Behind series has some old guy like sharpening a sword, and he has Ray Steele having like a secret gun that's hidden in a box that's supposed to look like a computer hard drive or whatever, and they're going to try to kill the Antichrist. And it's like, really? You guys spent all this time studying the Bible because you were left behind, and you never picked up the part where you're not supposed to kill the Antichrist? They totally get this wrong. I forget actually how the Antichrist in the Left Behind series dies. If somebody wants to rate that in the comment section, I would really appreciate that. It's been years since I read that book. But in real life, he dies by a bolt of lightning when Jesus actually shows up in a cloud and shoots him with a bolt of lightning like an arrow. At the same time, Satan is getting cast out of earth like a bolt of lightning. And I would like to think that Jesus is actually throwing Satan at the Antichrist and actually killing him that way. I would like to think it's like that, but we'll see. I just feel like that would be the ultimate superhero move. You know, two guys are trying to fight you, and you take one and you throw him at the other and kill him. I just think that would be awesome. You know, I mean, if you're Hulk and you're like fighting you're fighting Iron Man and Thor, and you just know like, okay, Thor's tougher than Iron Man, so I'm just gonna throw Thor at Iron Man and kill Iron Man like that. Like, that would be awesome. That's how you do it. Okay, that's how you fight. All right. Anyways. So it says, then the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold. So notice the 5 elements. The iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold. The iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold. So it's 4 kingdoms, but it's 5 elements. And you need to understand that 5th element is the Jews. It's Judaism. Okay? That's what it is. It's going to talk about people who are partly strong and partly brittle. And I've had all kinds of different theories. If like the brittle people are Islam, or the brittle people are the Europeans, until somebody on one of my Bible studies said, what do we know about potter's clay? And she said, that's the Jews. And I'm like, boom! This is why I invite other people to Bible studies, because I learn from other people. Okay? It's not just me being super geniustic and figuring out everything by myself. I learn from other people. But I accumulate that knowledge and I assimilate it, and then I process it and I share it with others. Okay? So credit to where the credit's due. That was Michael, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your last name, but this was Michael's wife who figured this out in our Bible study, and she's actually there in one of the episodes on the Bible study that we were in. That's on the Zoom study. So credit to where credit's due on that. Anyways, it says they were broken in pieces together. So notice the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold were broken in two pieces together. Why? How can they be broken in pieces together if these are going to be successive kingdoms? And the answer is because each one absorbs the prior. Okay? And it says, broken in pieces together and became like chaff on the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, and no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. So we want to understand this becoming a great mountain and filling the whole earth. Okay? This is going to have a dual fulfillment. Okay? This great mountain is, these mountains are kind of like kingdoms, and you're going to hear about this in Revelation chapter 18, where they talk about these 7 mountains on whom the woman sit, and this mountain is going to fill the whole earth. Okay, well, this mountain is going to first represent the church, and the church has a spiritual fulfillment of spreading the gospel throughout the earth, not dominion throughout the earth. Whenever you see dominion in the name of Jesus, you know that's not the church. The church does not try to dominate the world, okay? Not until Jesus gets here, and then the church is his administration, okay? Right now, the church is serving an ambassadorial mission, and you know what ambassadors never try to do? Conquer the country they're ambassadors to, okay? We are ambassadors. We are not conquering. The church militant is a lie. I realize that we wear armor and stuff, and we battle not against flesh and blood. I realize that, okay? But your embassies have soldiers in them, and what their job never is to do is to try to attack the government that they've been installed in to have a diplomatic service mission to, okay? So, it's going to fill the whole earth, and this is going to have a dual fulfillment too. And then he says, this is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king, okay? Notice he says we right here. We will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Who's he talking about? Who's the other we? Well, he's speaking for all the Magi. He's actually saving all their lives here, okay? So he's not just saying, I know and the other Magi don't know, because he knows that will get the other Magi killed. He's saying, we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king, okay? I thought maybe he might be, he says, but as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. So notice he says, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king. He's being very specific. Now he's getting this from the Holy Spirit, okay? But notice he's saying, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, that thou mightest know the thoughts of their heart. And so what he is doing is he's speaking collectively for all the other wise men to make sure that the king doesn't know. you can kill all your other magi and astrologers. Now think about how many Christians might be like, hey, wouldn't you want to do that? Hey, only the God of the Christians knows the answer to this. And Daniel's saying, no. I am speaking for all the magi and all the astrologers, and this is what we know, okay? So he's saying, as for me, this secret is not to revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, that thou might knowest the thoughts of their heart. Now, the real their sakes is going to be the angels and the Holy Spirit, who are really trying to make this known to the king. And this is also Elohim. This is God, right? So he is actually speaking for a plural Godhead. But he's not saying that. And the reason is because the their sakes is meant to deter the king. It's meant for Daniel to give credit to where credit's due, but also deter the king from killing everybody else. Okay? So he is very merciful in what he's doing. He is not an opportunistic. He's not saying, oh, we're the good Jews and those are the bad pagans. Let's get them all killed. Because Daniel knows we're the bad Jews. That's why we're in captivity in the first place. Okay? He has some humility. And he's going to say that the iron, the clay, and the brass and all this are broken in pieces together. And then he says this, we're going to tell the king the interpretation. He says, thou, O king, are a king of kings, king of kings, king of kings. What does he mean? He means there's a bunch of other kingdoms that you rule over. You're a king of kings, okay? A king of kings, not the king of kings. Jesus is the king of kings. Nebuchadnezzar is the most powerful ruler in the world, but he is not the ruler of the whole world. But his kingdom is great. It says, for the God of heaven has given thee a kingdom and strength and glory. God of heaven has given him a kingdom of power and strength and glory. And then he says, wherever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, these metaphors are very important because they're going to be used by Ezekiel. They're going to be used by Jesus. Okay? The beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into your hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art a head of gold. Okay? Now he's gonna say this in another metaphor, how he was a great tree, and the birds of heaven nested in his branches, and the beasts of the field would rest under his shade. Okay? Jesus is going to use that metaphor in his ministry. You need to understand what it means, because it's a metaphor about the church becoming Christendom. Okay? It's a prophecy. And he says, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. So after him. Okay? So this kingdom is going to start after him. But we know exactly what happens. That king overcomes his kingdom. Okay? And so we're going to see that happen 4 kingdoms in a row. Okay? And the kingdom before is going to overcome the kingdoms after. Now you're going to have a really, really dumb theory from Joel Richardson that the Islamic Caliphate is one of these kingdoms, and one of his primary evidences for this is because Rome never conquered all the territory of the Persian leg of the empire, and he doesn't need to conquer the entire territory of the Persian leg of the empire because Alexander the Great already did. He needs to conquer Alexander the Great's empire, which would be the seats of power that Alexander the Great left behind, and Rome conquered all of those. Okay, they conquered all of them. So that's why when Rome takes over the entire Mediterranean and Israel, there's no more Antiochus Epiphanes after that, and he controlled everything to Persia. Now I realize the Parthian Empire arose and took over that territory, but the point is that kingdom was taken over by Rome. Okay, and the Caliphate, even though the Caliphate took over all of half of the Roman Empire and even sacked Constantinople, they never sacked the entire Roman Empire because they never got Rome. Okay, they never, remember, there were always 2 seats of power in the Roman Empire, always, even in Constantine's day. There was Rome and Constantinople. There were 2 seats of power. And the Muslims got one, and the popes got the other. Okay? And they still have it. So you can't say that Rome was conquered by any other kingdom that came after it. You had a chunk of territory of the Romans that was conquered by the Muslims, and yes, they conquered the Persian kingdom too, but they've never conquered Rome. Okay, and so you're not going to have Rome be conquered as a territory and as an entity until you have Christ's return. Okay? So don't expect the Vatican, maybe the Vatican is going to get blown up and Constantinople's going to be the thing. But Rome as an entity, as an empire, does not get conquered until Christ gets back. And that's why it still exists in the church. It still exists in the church. All these Christendom-based churches that have tax-exempt land, okay? Tax-exempt land. Think about just the Roman Catholics. They have land all over planet Earth. Plus they have Rome, okay? If you think that means that empire has been conquered, who conquered them? Because even though you have Rome, I realize you have Rome being, the papacy taken captive by the Franks and by Napoleon. But what ends up happening with them? Well, they end up being crowned emperors by the popes. And when the pope is crowning them emperors, you need to understand the higher authority crowns the lesser. Okay. When they have the popes crown them emperor, they're telling the popes that the popes are in higher authority. They're just forcing them to do something that they want to have done. And so basically, what's been going on in Europe ever since Constantinople fell and the Byzantine emperors fell is that the popes have been declaring who's going to be the new emperor because they are the remnant of the administration of the Roman Empire. Okay? They're appointing new kings, but those kings are subordinate to them because they're the ones crowning them. They're deputies of the true Roman emperor, and the true Roman emperor is going to reemerge with the Antichrist. Okay, you've had a lot of people try to claim to be that guy, like Napoleon and Hitler and the czars of Russia, and even the Byzantines, the Ottomans who conquered the Byzantine Empire. You've had a lot of people claim that. But until that person makes the Pope submit to them, this is important. Until they make the Pope submit to them, they're not going to be that true Roman Emperor. Because the Roman Emperor gave the Pope the number one office in the church. It came from the Roman Emperor. If you go read I think it's either the Second Council of Constantinople or the Council of Chalcedon, one of the two. He actually says that he establishes the Patriarchy at Nicaea, and then at the Council of Chalcedon, he establishes Rome as the number one see and Constantinople as the number two. And he never changes that. He tries to exercise authority, and then the Patriarch of Constantinople tries to assert himself over Rome, but the Emperor never does. And since those offices come from the Emperor in the first place, and the Emperor made Rome number one, only the Caesar, the only person who can be Caesar is the one who makes the Pope submit to him. And that's going to be the Antichrist, okay? The idea that the Pope could be the false prophet because he has to submit to the Emperor of Rome, that is actually very plausible. But there's another piece to this, and you need to understand it, okay? This last kingdom, so notice it starts out as a kingdom of iron, okay? Why? Because the Roman Empire was growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And when they get to Israel, they have a different kind of relationship with Israel. They technically don't conquer Israel. Okay? Now, there are going to be points when they sack Jerusalem, they're going to take control of Israel, but they technically don't conquer Israel. They're actually allies with Israel, and they're kind of frenemies. And the reason for this is because the Jews actually invite them in. Remember, the Jews overthrow the Greeks. This is all going to be in Daniel. And then they invite the Romans in. Okay? They invite the Romans in as allies, and of course then the Romans are going to set up bases there. So it's kind of like how we have bases in Germany and Japan. And yes, we did conquer them in the past, but we have bases all over the world, and we haven't necessarily conquered those nations. We just have bases in them. Well, that's how Rome's relationship was with Israel. And what ends up happening is that the Herods end up establishing themselves as basically a buffer state between Rome and the Parthians. And Syria is going to do that too. And those kingdoms at different times are going to assert independence from Rome. And then Rome's going to take them and conquer them. Okay? But the initial phase of their relationship is going to be an alliance against Antiochus Epiphanes. And so you guys need to understand that when you see how it's going to be partly of iron, partly of clay, and one's going to be strong and one's going to be brittle. Obviously, the clay is going to be brittle. Israel is not going to have the strength to maintain that equal status, just like the Medes and the Persians start out as allies and the Persians end up dominating, okay? It's the exact same thing with Rome in Judea, okay? So it's that alliance that exists when Christ comes the first time, and it's that alliance that's going to exist when Christ comes the second time. It's a dual fulfillment. So he says the fourth kingdom will be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks into pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaketh all of these. So now all of these are broken. Well, who are these? Well, those are the kingdoms of gold, silver, and brass. Okay? And when you get to Nebuchadnezzar being turned into a beast, that is going to have a multiple fulfillment too, because that's actually Nebuchadnezzar turning into a beast himself. But he's actually, it says he's bound by iron and brass. And what is that? Well, iron and brass are basically the two kingdoms that bind him. Okay? And the reason is because the Roman kingdom is a Greek culture, but a Roman government. That's what you need to understand. The Roman seat of power was actually a city that was established between the Etruscans and the Greeks. Okay, so the Greeks basically occupied southern Italy. The Etruscans occupied northern Italy, and Rome was initially created as kind of a stronghold or a major city that was going to be in the midst of the two. And it basically was going to be potentially a defensive city against the Greeks, but it ends up becoming like this metropolis where they all come together and they start mixing, and all these different cultures start to merge in Rome. So Rome is a true international metropolis. You have a lot of different tribes that are in Italy when Rome comes into being. And when you have the Roman Senate built, you have basically the first form of fascism and the first form of representative democracy. Okay, now democracy already existed in the Greeks in terms of, the rich and the wealthy landowning all voting on policies and stuff like that. The Greeks had already experimented with that. It sucked, but the first representative democracy, the first form of republican democracy, is going to come to be at Rome between Greeks and Etruscans, okay? And other tribes as well, but Greeks and Etruscans are the main ones. And so it's going to have a Greek culture, but a Roman government. And that's why you're going to find the iron and brass together. And the iron and brass bind Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? And so that's important to know that. So Nebuchadnezzar is going to be bound by iron and brass, and Babylon is going to be bound by Greek and Rome. And that's why Peter calls Rome Babylon in 1 Peter. Okay? Because it's actually, it has absorbed Babylon. And basically, Persia is going to be the first to absorb Babylon, but then Alexander is going to conquer Persia not terribly long afterward. And then substantially longer afterward, you're going to have Romans conquer the Greeks, and they're going to hang on to it for a long time after that. But the Greek culture is going to persist, which is why Greek logic is so prevalent in the entire Western world, and which is why that border at the Euphrates is kind of that main fighting zone. Okay, now the Ottomans came in and conquered the western half of the Roman Empire, but the western or the eastern half of the Roman Empire, but the western half of the Roman Empire would keep pushing in and having Crusader states, and then they eventually came in and conquered the Ottoman Empire, and then they had the Sykes-Picot Agreement and broke up the Middle East, and then they've been meddling in the Middle East ever since, because the West, which is all pretty much subordinated to the Pope in terms of its legal history, is basically asserting Rome's claim over Babylon, which is a real spiritual claim that they have because of these prophecies, and that's why they keep being able to pull weight against like Persia and Arabia and the other parts of the world that would like to dominate that. So he's going to, it says you're going to see the feet. It says the iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things. Iron is going to break into pieces all these kingdoms. So they're broken into pieces. They're not coming back. This is another thing that people are going to get wrong. They're going to claim because that you see these kings later on, that these kings are going to persist because these beasts are allowed to continue. And that the beasts are allowed to continue after Christ comes. And that's because the beasts represent the nations that they come from. And these represent the kingdoms. And you need to understand the difference between a nation and a kingdom. A nation is a people group, and a kingdom is a political dominion with a king at its head. Okay, you need to understand the difference between nations and kingdoms. There is a relationship between the four beasts and the four kingdoms. But you need to understand the difference between a nation and a kingdom. Because that is going to come in again and again and again in Israel's history, and it's going to come in again and again and again in Bible prophecy, okay? Israel was a nation without a king for many years. I was prophesied about them. Okay, they started out as a nation with God as their king. Then they asked for a king, and then they end up falling into sin with that king, and then they end up as a nation without a king. Okay? So then it says, whereas so shall the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron, for as much as you saw the iron mixed with the miry clay. Okay? So what you have is a divided kingdom. The Jews and the Romans don't really get along that well, but the entire kingdom has the strength of iron. Okay? So you see the Jews in this latter part of their captivity kind of asserting an independence. Okay? They're actually an ally to the last kingdom and not just entirely subject to it. Okay? And this is what you see with the Jews in the end of the Roman Empire. The ancient Roman Empire by the time Christ comes, and that's what you see with the Jews today. Okay, they have it. Remember that the Jews asserted their independence through the Maccabees and then allied with Rome, just like the Jews today asserted their independence with the modern state of Israel, and now are allied basically with NATO. Okay, they're not a member of NATO, but they're allied with NATO, and they're inviting NATO into the Middle East to basically ally with them. There are patterns here. The things that happened in Christ's day are happening in Christ's day now. Okay, so Christ has two comings. He has 2 days. Okay, so then he says, as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and part of clay, so the king shall be partly strong and partly broken. Okay, and whereas thou saw the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves. So thou saw the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with the clay. Okay, so what is the iron and what is the clay, and why do they not mix with one another? Okay, so this is a broader thing. Well, think about who the iron is. Okay, the iron is Rome, the clay is the Jews. They're not really mixed together, but then it talks about another thing. They will mingle themselves with the seed of men. Well, what's going on there? Well, think about what's gone on with the Roman Catholic Church, okay, and all its derivatives in terms of Orthodoxy and Protestantism. Think about that. They have mingled themselves with the seed of men. They've spread around the entire earth, okay, but they don't cleave to them. They have tax-exempt status. They're not really answering to our government. This is why America was so adamant about not ever having a Catholic president before Kennedy, is because every Catholic is a subject to Rome. They're a subject of the Pope, okay? And so how can you have somebody ruling our country who's a subject to the Pope? The whole point of the American Revolution was to break away from foreign influences, and that included the secular dominion of England and the religious dominion of the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman state religion, okay? And so it says they will not cleave to each other even as iron is not mixed with clay, okay? So notice they're going to mingle with the seed of men, and there's going to be a similarity between Rome and the seed of men, and so it's like even as, right? And the iron and the clay. Okay, and there's a similarity between Rome and all the nations to the relationship between Rome and the Jews. Okay, so you're going to have basically the church and all the world, which is Roman, and then you're going to have, again, not the true church, not the Church of Christ, but the Roman Catholic institution, and then you're going to have the Rome and the Jews. Okay, so you really have 3 pieces of this puzzle. You have Rome themselves, you have the Roman Church, which is spread throughout the earth, and then you have the Jews. Okay, that's the pieces. So you're going to have the iron, you're going to have them mingling themselves with the seed of men, and then you also have, so notice they shall mingle. So you have the iron and the miry clay. You also have the Jews spread throughout the earth, and they're not really allied with the countries that they're in, because they're kind of enclave communities that keep their own culture. Okay, so you have Rome and then you have Israel as being spread throughout the earth, and having communities all over the earth, but they're not really of them. Okay, and that's why you're going to have a point when they're going to consolidate back to their original basis. Okay, and then it says, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. In the days of these kings. Okay, so this is where you need to understand this. Now, the iron has already broken the other kingdoms. So who are these kings? And this is going to be your hint that this has a dual fulfillment to it. In the days of these kings, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom. Well, we're going to get into other prophecies later, and we're going to find out that we see toes of iron and clay, and we just so happen people will say, well, there's 10 toes. Well, there's actually 10 kings that arise out of this kingdom, okay? But we don't interpret that prophecy by a prophecy that comes after it. We interpret the prophecy after it by the prophecy that comes before it. So this can't be talking about this. Remember, when Daniel gets this prophecy, this entire prophecy has an interpretation in history, but it can't be based on a prophecy that comes later. Okay? When he says these kings, there has to be a reference point to these kings. And we already know that, notice it says the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of iron. Okay? But it says the kingdom shall be divided, but it doesn't talk about multiple kings. Okay? So he's talking about the kingdom being divided as opposed to united. Okay? So he's talking about it being divided in terms of heart, if that makes sense. Okay, and then he talks about that the iron breaks in pieces and subdues all of these. So these other kingdoms are gone. He breaks and subdues all of them. They're gone. Okay, so who are these kings? And the answer is these kings represent the Caesar who was in charge when Christ came and the Antichrist. There's two kings. There's two versions of this kingdom. Okay. That's why you need to know this, because the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, so notice the God of heaven set up a kingdom, okay? And that's why kingdom of God and kingdom of heaven can be used interchangeably. People who say that there's a definite difference between the two are just bad theologians, okay? God of heaven set up a kingdom. That's why it can be called the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, okay? And the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven has two phases to it. It has the spiritual phase, which is the church, and it has the material phase, which is the millennium, okay? And that's why it comes with these kings. Now, if people don't see this, I don't know what to tell you about their ignorance, because they're going to take these kings and be good. Like, who are these kings? They're either going to say, oh, those are the 10 kings that come out of the Roman Empire. And it's like, there's nothing about 10 kings coming out of the Roman Empire here. And or they'll say, oh, those are the kings that existed before the Roman Empire. And it's like, no. He says he's going to destroy them. Okay? You need to pay attention to this chronology. So it says, in the days of these kings. Okay? And you need to understand who these kings are. And the only thing you can understand in the context of this prophecy itself is that these kings must be multiple phases of this kingdom. So the kingdom shall be divided. Shall be divided, and that's going to have a double entente. It's going to have its division between, the not being united, and it's also going to have two iterations to it. There's a spiritual side and there's a material side. Okay, and so that is going to be where the church comes in, and that's where the millennial kingdom comes in, the messianic kingdom. Okay, so that's what it's going to be. And this is, in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And this is important. Shall never be destroyed. That means the church that comes in the first king shall never be destroyed. And then the kingdom come, which is Christ's physical kingdom come, shall never be destroyed. Okay? And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Okay? All these kingdoms. Okay? So notice all these kingdoms have already been broken. Okay? By the Roman. But then what breaks up the Roman Empire? And some people are going to say, oh, what broke up the Roman Empire was the Goths and the Ottomans and the Huns and stuff. No. What broke up the Roman Empire was the church. Okay? That's why you're going to have the church breaking the Roman Empire into pieces. And some parts of the church go to the Caliphate, and some parts of the church go to the Goths, and some parts of the church go to the Russians. And then it's going to further break up to the Germans and the English and stuff like that. But it's really the church that breaks up the Roman Empire, okay? And it's going to break it up, and it's going to consume it. Okay? Now, this is going to be the Roman state religion version of it. This is not going to be the true church, but the true church is within that framework. Okay, so it really is the church breaking it up. And then you're going to have Christ's kingdom come in the last days when it all reunites politically, and he's going to break it up again politically. Okay? And he's going to, materially, politically dominate the world. And so then he says, for as much as thou sawest a stone that was cut out of the mountains without hand, and that it brake into pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God that has made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. The dream is certain. Now, I just heard this guy Kirby on Standing for Truth talking about how in Daniel's prophecy of the four beasts, he's going to say that the four beasts are going to represent four kingdoms that come after Babylon, because he's going to say, shall arise, okay? Well, look at what he says to Nebuchadnezzar here. He says, the great king shall come to pass, he has made known what shall come to pass hereafter, okay? Just because he's saying after this doesn't mean that the current kingdom is not included in this, okay? Anyways, it says the dream is certain and the interpretation thereof is sure. Okay, so this is going to happen. This is not something, there's no if statements here. This is just going to happen. And Daniel's going to say that. Nebuchadnezzar is going to give him all kinds of stuff, and then he's going to try to make a big gold statue, make a bunch of people worship it, and that doesn't work out for him too well. And then it's going to keep going through the history of Nebuchadnezzar and his descendants and Daniel's life after that. I'm not going to get into Nebuchadnezzar's beast being bound by brass and iron. You want to study that yourself. Then we're going to get to Daniel 7, and Daniel 7 is going to have his beasts, the four great beasts, okay? They're diverse from one another. And it's going to say, let's see, and there's a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong, and it had great iron teeth, and then it devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue of the feet with it, okay? So it's a great beast, great and terrible, okay? This beast is not a king. Okay, which is why you're going to have the little horn, which is coming out of the beast. That's a king. Okay, the beast is not a king. None of these are kings. These beasts, all the beasts are going to represent people groups. They're going to represent nations. Okay, and it's going to say, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up another little horn from among them. The first three were plucked up. Why? Because the horns are going to represent the political kings, okay? And you're going to have 10 kings that are going to rise from this fourth beast, and that is going to be the 10-head confederacy of the final world government. That's the final phase of the Roman Empire before one comes up, and he plucks up 3, and he is the Antichrist, okay? And then he says, and I beheld until thrones were cast down. Cast down is a wrong translation here. It should say were set down. Okay, so they're not cast down; they're set down. In other words, they're setting up these thrones for people to sit on. People think the thrones cast down might be like the 10 kings being set down, but this is actually the thrones being set up for judgment. Remember, you're going to have 24 elders sitting on 24 thrones that are going to sit in judgment with the Ancient of Days, whose garment was as white as snow, and head was of pure wool, and his throne was as a fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. Who is this? The Ancient of Days, is the Father. Okay, and you could say, well, it's the Son too. Yeah, but if you go read the book of Revelation, you have a distinction between the Lamb and the one sitting on the front throne. That's the Father. Okay. And then it says, a fiery stream issued and came forth before him. Thousands of thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment seat and the books were open. The books were open. Multiple books. Okay. So the the 7-sealed scroll is the first of the books, but then you're going to have the Lamb's Book of Life. You're going to have the Book of the Deeds, and everybody's going to be judged by those books. And so this judgment that occurs is actually going to transcend almost the entire book of Revelation. It's really going to begin when these seats are set down, and this is going to be in chapter 4. Remember, chapters 2 and 3. Chapter 1 is an intro. Chapters 2 and 3 is basically about the history of the church. And then chapters 4 on is about this judgment that takes place. And it's going to parallel the history of the church. And that's why it is going to go up to the rapture and then a little beyond that. But the history of the church is going to go up to the rapture and a little beyond that too. Okay? And so you're going to have the things that are now and the things that are hereafter in Rome. And remember, because you have a dual fulfillment, you have the spiritual and the material, that's how you're going to have that iterated in the book of Revelation. You're going to have the history of the spiritual kingdom, which is going to be the church, and then you're going to have the history of the material kingdom, which is going to be basically the birth pangs leading up to Christ's kingdom coming, and it starts with this judgment. And this judgment doesn't start in the last days. This judgment starts immediately after Christ's death and resurrection. So John is going to get caught up to heaven, and at first the lamb isn't there, and then they're looking for the lamb when they're getting ready to open the first book, and nobody's worthy to open it, and then the lamb shows up as if slain. So John is actually there in this vision prior to Christ showing up, okay? Which means the vision starts with John being taken up to heaven during Christ's earthly ministry. Remember, this is a vision. He's going into a different time space, okay? And Christ shows up, and he's conquered to receive the scroll, and then he receives the scroll, and then these 7 seals are opened. And by the time you get to the 7th seal being opened, you're in the beginning of Daniel's 70th week, okay? That's when it starts, okay? And some people are going to say that's going to lead you to the end of Daniel's 70th week, and that is not true. There is nothing whatsoever that is going to attach any of the seals to Daniel's 70th week, okay? And if you know the prophecies and the other things that they're talking about and the signs during the 70 seals, you will know for a certainty that Daniel's 70th week is after the 7 seals are over, okay? But he's going to say that he says the judgment seat was the judgment was set and the books were open. So the judgment is going to be the king and the throne, the 24 elders, and then the books were open. It's going to be after the Lamb was slain. That's when that's going to begin. And the end of the books that are open is going to be at the end of the great white throne judgment. Okay. And then he says, and I beheld, because of the voice of the great words of the horn which he spoke, I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. So that's toward the end of the book of Revelation. That would be at Revelation 19 when that happens, okay? And then concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. So notice the beasts, they're not kingdoms, they're nations. But the nations have their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season of time. So Christ comes to rule over all the nations, okay? These beasts are not the 4 kingdoms. They're the nations represented in those 4 kingdoms, okay? The dominions have already been taken away successively with the exception of the last one, which is going to be under these 10 kings when Christ arises. And the little horn's going to pluck up 3 of those kings, so he's going to really subdue it, okay? And so those nations, again, the Greeks and the Persians and the Babylonians and the Romans, all these peoples are going to be allowed to live throughout the millennium, okay? They're not necessarily going to be doomed. Their lives are prolonged for a season in time, okay? So Christ is going to rule over them. Can they get saved in the millennium? I think they can, based on the nature of Christ. I don't think he's going to keep people groups alive for 1,000 years just to send them all in hell, because God's not like that. I think they can get saved in the millennium. I think they can repent. I think they can humble themselves, but they're not going to be part of the church. They're not going to be part of his government administration. They're going to be under that authority, okay? And then I saw in the night visions and beheld one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Okay? So this is in the visions. So notice he's going to say this is prolonged for a season of time. It's kind of like a stopping point. But now he's talking about this guy. Okay? I saw one like a Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven. Well, that's in Revelation 14. And there was dominion and glory and given from all the people, nations, and languages. So you notice he doesn't say kingdoms. People, nations, and languages. Okay? Remember, Rome is going to subdue all the kingdoms that came before it. And so in the last days, you're not going to have any other kings. You're going to have the 10 kings that are part of the Roman administration and then the little horn that rises up over it. You're not going to have any other kings for Christ to subdue. When Christ takes out the little horn and takes over his kingdom, the other kingdoms are already subdued by it, just like all the other kingdoms were subdued by Rome before Christ got here the first time. Okay? And he says, all the people, nations, and languages should serve him, and his dominion is an everlasting dominion and shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Okay? The last kingdom before him is Rome. There are 4 kingdoms and then Christ. You can't come up with any other equation. You cannot make the caliphate one of these kingdoms. The caliphate doesn't even have a king. You can say, oh, it's got a caliph. That's not a king. Do you know who the caliph is? He's a political head of an executive religious state. Okay? He is like strictly by Islam, he is not a king. He doesn't rule Islam. They just say Islam is basically like saying we're going back to when Israel had no king, and that's who's ruling. Okay? Like God was king. Okay? That's how they think. So don't like try to overlay, a Western Christian mindset onto the caliphate in order to try to make it squeeze into your stupid Islamic Antichrist theory, because it's a stupid theory that you made up for 9/11 and went on Glenn Beck with, and it's just dumb. So, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit, and in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. Okay? I came near to one of them that stood by, and I asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. So I just interpret a lot of this for you. I went through the book of Revelation. I'm doing that, but here's the angel now interpreting it for Daniel. He said, these great beasts, which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. These great beasts which are 4 kings which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever and ever. Okay? So we have the saints of the Most High possessing the kingdom. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron. His teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass. Okay? The teeth are iron because its dictatorial head is Roman. The nails are of brass because its actual legions are primarily Greek. Okay? It says, which devoured, break into pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. Okay? So, these are primarily Greek legions that conquer the world, but it's Roman dictatorial power. Okay? And it says, and the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even that horn had eyes and a mouth that spake very, very great things. Okay? So you have a horn. This little horn has eyes and a mouth that speaks very great things, and the look was more stout than his fellows. Okay, what does this word stout mean? He's more stout. It says Rob, Captain, Chief, Great, Lord, Master, Stout. Okay, so stout is really kind of a weird name, because if I think of stout, I think of something like sturdy, but it's basically saying his look was greater than the others. He seemed to have more authority than the others. Captain, Chief, Lord, Master. Okay, his look was more authoritative than the others, and so in other words, we have 10 kings technically ruling. He's subdued 3 of them, so he is actually the strongest of all of them. Okay? He is not ruling this as a dictator until he sits in the temple and claims that he's God. That's when the other kings start to come against him, because they never signed up for that. Okay? That's where Armageddon's going to come in. And he said, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. Okay, so this king is going to make war with the saints. Now, the Jews are never referred to as the saints in prophecies. Okay, they're never referred to as the holy ones. Okay, they are holy and they are set apart. But if you look at this word, this is in Aramaic here. Kaddish, the holy ones. You're going to find it in reference to, now they're God's holy people, but they're not referred to in saints in Daniel's prophecies. The holy ones are either going to be a reference to the church or to the angels. Okay? And he's going to say the judgment was given to the saints of the Most High and the time that the saints possess the kingdom. So this is the church. This is not the Jews. Now, there's going to be Jews as part of it, okay? But the saints of the Most High possess the kingdom. And that's going to be Jesus. He's the arch-holy one. And those who are in Christ, those are going to be the holy ones, the saints, okay? And then he said, the fourth beast shall break forth the kingdom upon the earth, and shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it into pieces. So people will sit there and go, well, Rome didn't take over the whole earth and break it into pieces, and come up with dumb Islamic Antichrist theories. And they forget that Rome is not done. Rome is still going, and yes, it is still subduing the earth, okay? It is NATO now. It is NATO now, okay? And then the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So this 11th king, if you will, says the 10 horns are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. Now I'm just going to explain this to you. He's diverse from the other ones because he is one of them. But he becomes the image of the beast. Okay? He becomes a robot. It's literally what's going to happen. That's why he's diverse from them. When you're looking at all this stuff and you're trying to reconcile, I'm just going to tell you how it's reconciled. He becomes a robot. Okay? He is merged with AI. He is Johnny Depp from Transcendence. He is the image of the beast. Okay? That's how he's diverse from them. And he shall subdue 3 kings. Now, when does he subdue 3 kings? Well, he goes in and he subdues, Hippolytus is going to come into this and say, well, he's going to subdue the king of Libya and the king of the south, which is going to be Ethiopia and Egypt. That's who his belief that the 3 kings are. And maybe he is right, or it could be Russia, China, and Iran, which are going to represent 3 different blocks of these 10 kingdoms. I don't know exactly who. There's different theories on that, but he's going to subdue 3 of these 10 kings. That's how we need to see the whole world broken up into 10 kingdoms before we see who he subdues. Okay, and there's a possible theory that the 10 kings that are broken up are the 10 kingdoms that come out of the Ottoman Empire. You can pull 10 out of there. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, and it's an arguable, so I don't know if that is. I think the 10 kings are going to be the whole world divided into 10 kingdoms, and he's going to subdue 3 of them. And my opinion on who the 3 he subdues are going to be North Africa is going to be one of them when he subdues Egypt. Europe he's going to subdue right away, and then I think the Middle East is going to be one. So we'll see what those 10 kingdoms look like, and then figure out how he subdues them in time. I don't have like a definite answer for that, okay? And then he says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, okay? That's when the abomination of desolation occurs, when he gets in the temple and says he's God. And he shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Now remember how Jesus says the law and the prophet will not one jot or tittle will pass until all things are fulfilled? He's going to think to change that. What he's doing, this is why Messiah 2030 is so bad, is he's shifting the times and the seasons that God has appointed. Okay? And some people think, well, he's going to do a new calendar reset. Well, maybe he is. Maybe he's going to make a new year 0. He is going to claim that the kingdom has come 3.5 years before it's actually come. That's why you have a discrepancy of 3.5 years in all the major timelines that are associated with Christ's first and second coming. You're always going to find a 3.5 year discrepancy. Why? Why is there a range of 3.5 years that we can't agree on? The answer is because the Antichrist is going to try to change times and laws and make you think that the kingdom's come 3.5 years before it's come. Okay? And so he's going to think to change times and laws. He's going to suppose, I'm guaranteeing this word think means suppose, to bear in mind, to hope, to think. Okay? Shana means to alter. Zaman means to be seasons. And decree or law. Okay? So what he is going to do is God has appointed his feast days and he's appointed his prophecies to line up to Christ's coming, and he's going to try to reinterpret all that to make his kingdom the kingdom of God. Okay? The problem is, and here's a big fail. There's a couple of big fails. One, he's not going to enter into Israel from the gate of the east because that is walled up, and it's not going to be opened up until Christ touches down the Mount of Olives and breaks it in two. And two, Christ needs to set up his kingdom in Elam, which is in Persia, which it's in Iran. Okay? And the Euphrates River is going to be the border of his kingdom. He is never going to get to Elam. Okay? He is not going to fulfill the prophecies. He's going to fulfill a lot of them, but it's going to be the kind of thing where even if you're a Jew and you know your Bible, you're going to know this is not him because he doesn't set up his kingdom in Elam. He hasn't entered the gate from the east. This is not the Christ. Okay? So, he's going to say, he speaks out great words against the Most High, and that's when his downfall starts. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given in his hand until a time, a times, and a dividing of times. The saints are given into his hand for a time, of times, and a dividing of times. 3.5 years. What's going on? This is where the post-trib theory comes from. They think the Antichrist is going to be continually killing Christians for 3.5 years. Well, maybe he will. But what you're going to find is you're going to find a bunch of saints that are resurrected at the end of the tribulation. Okay? That is not the rapture. Those are the ones who are given to his hand for 3.5 years, and there's a reason why they're not resurrected. Okay? They are bodily given into his hands, and he cuts their heads off for not worshiping the mark of the beast. Okay? Notice you have him speaking great words, him changing times and laws. In other words, he's establishing the kingdom come, and then the saints given to his hands for a time, and half a time. Now, not all the saints, not all of them. There are going to be a resurrection and a rapture at this time. He hasn't put that forward yet. He's going to do that in Daniel chapter 12. But he's telling you that the saints are going to be given to his hand for a time, and half a time. And bodily they are. They're never given into his hand spiritually. Okay? But bodily they are. And that's why you're going to have people who are not resurrected until that 3.5 years is over when Christ returns. Okay? And it says, but the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, and consume and destroy it till the end. So notice you're going to have a 3.5 years where saints are given into his hands, and then also he's going to consume and destroy it unto the end. Okay, well, what's the end? Well, the end is the end of that 3.5 years. So notice the Antichrist only rules the earth for 3.5 years. He doesn't rule for the entire 70 weeks, nor does he start to rule until he speaks great words against the Most High. Okay? This is important. He is just the more dominant of those 10 kings. Okay? Those 10 kings are ruling until he sits in the temple and says, I'm God. And the moment he says that, those other kings start to come against him for Armageddon. They're not going to stand for this. Okay? And then they're all going to band together against Christ. And he's basically going to try to assert himself as the dictator of this thing. Why is he doing it like that? And the answer is because that's what Caesar did. If you know how Caesar went, you had basically the empire fasces, which is 10 rods around an axe, and that was representing 10 kings being given into the executive power of the Roman government. But then the Roman government had three, a triumvirate, okay, who was meant to share the executive power of the Roman state. And then one is going to arise and subdue the three. Okay? So it doesn't mean these other, three that are plucked up are necessarily going to be killed or anything like that, but it seems like he's going to dominate them. Okay? So then the judgment is going to take away his dominion, and it says to consume and destroy it until the end. And this word consume is going to be something you want to focus on, okay? They're going to take away his dominion to consume and destroy it until the end, okay? So they're going to destroy and consume his empire. The bowls of wrath are not poured out on the entire world. All the waters are turned to blood. They are poured out on his kingdom. Okay? Think about it. 3.5 years with no water? It's impossible. Okay? All the water of his kingdom is going to be turned to blood. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the whole world. I'm sorry, maybe it is. Maybe they're drinking bottled water for 3.5 years. Or maybe they're just pulling it out of the air through desal or whatever, those air systems that pull the humidity out of the air and create drinking water with it, because all the waters of the lakes and the rivers and everything are going to be blood for 3.5 years. That could be. And then it says, the kingdom and dominion, the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all kingdoms and dominions shall serve and obey him. Okay? The him is going to be the Most High. The Most High. And he says, here there too is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Okay? So he's like, this perplexed me, but I just hung on to this vision. So that's chapter 7. Chapter 8, he's going to have another vision, and this is going to be about a ram with 2 horns, and and then a goat with 1 horn. Okay? And this is very specifically about Persia and Greece. But because the Antichrist is going to arise from Greece. Now this is important. This is very important, okay? Historically, people think Greece is the descendants of Javan, okay? Now the descendants of Javan are part of Greece, but guess what the Greeks were originally called by Homer? They're called the Danite, okay? I just found this out, that Homer, who writes the Iliad, this is the first ever popular Greek writing, okay? He calls the Greeks the Danite, okay? The Greeks are the Danites. They are the Danites, okay? And if you read all the stories and the legends of Hercules, and these are all based on history, there was a guy named Hercules who came to Peloponnese, which is where the Greek civilization started, okay? This is where the Greeks are, okay? You have the Minoans and then the Mycenaeans, and the Mycenaeans are really where the Greek culture starts, okay? And the people who are called afterwards Greeks are dominated by the Danites, and that's why you're going to have in Ezekiel the Javan. It's going to say Javan. They're going to translate it Greeks, and Dan selling together. But here's the thing: they didn't call Javan the Greeks. They called Dan the Greeks. Okay, and Homer calls the Greeks the Danite. Okay, so the Danites are the Greeks. That's who they are. They left Israel and they became the Greeks. And what you're going to have is this kingdom that is Romans and Greeks who's ruling the world, which means it's the Danite kingdom. The Danites are everywhere. Okay, and the Antichrist is going to be a Danite, and he's going to be a Greek. That's why he comes out of the Greek kingdom, not the Roman kingdom, because he is a Danite. Okay? Now, the goat, which represents Alexander the Great. Is Alexander the Great a Danite? I don't know for certain. I don't know the Macedonian history enough to know that. Probably Hercules is definitely a Danite. I think Hercules is Samson. Perseus, who was involved with, I think he was involved with the siege of Troy. I could be wrong. But definitely, what is the guy? Achilles is a Danite. According to what I have, if they're descendants of Hercules, Hercules was a Danite. I'm almost positive Hercules is Samson. In fact, no, I'm going to say it. I'm positive Hercules is Samson. I mean, you literally have Samson go kill a lion and then kill a bunch of men with the jawbone of a donkey. And then after that, you have a man showing up in Crete wearing a lion's mane, basically, and carrying a club. That's what Hercules is known for. He wears a lion's mane and he carries a club. Okay? He's Samson. Okay? And there's a 20-year gap where Samson, it's not talking about what he does, but it says he judged Israel for 20 years. So that means he went to Crete. He overthrew the Philistines with Crete, which basically were they're the Caftor, they're people of Caftor, and he overthrows Crete for Zeus, who is the original head of the Greeks. That's why he's the chief Greek god. He's Zeus. He's the actual king of Crete. Okay, and then he is going to go up to Peloponnese, where the Mycenaean civilization is going to start, and he's going to take the sea peoples and form a confederacy with them, and that becomes the Greek civilization, and that's going to be the island of the Peloponnese. And the bridge between Peloponnese and the area up to Athens is Corinth. Okay? So important that you know this. because Athens and Corinth are obviously big in the New Testament, right? So, so the Danites are basically all over where the Antichrist comes from, and that's why he comes from the Greeks. And he says that the goat waxed great, and when he became strong, the great horn was broken. Now you have Alexander the Great. Remember, he is a Macedonian. His father conquers the Greeks. And then basically Alexander is claimed to be descended from Hercules, I believe. So he could be a Danite. But he is also claimed to be descended from Zeus. Okay, and Zeus and Hercules are related somehow. I have a feeling that Samson took a wife from Zeus, and that's where the Peloponnesian civilizations come. So that's why you have the Spartans, who are part of the Peloponnesian civilization. They're one of them, and then there's another one, and I can't remember off the top of my head, that definitely were involved with Hercules. Okay, and they claimed ancestry from Hercules. And the Spartans are known for combing their long hair, which is the source of their strength. Well, this is all before Samson gets his hair cut. So that's probably where they got it from. And then it says, therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. So he's talking about the 4 great kingdoms. And the reason he's doing this is he's talking about where the Antichrist comes from. Out of one of them came forth a little horn. Now remember, we already have established that the little horn is going to be this one who becomes the Antichrist and becomes the image of the beast, who's going to be in these kingdoms. So when we have a little horn, we've already established what the little horn is. And it waxed exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. So it's telling you what direction it's coming from and what direction it's going. If it's going towards the south and the east and towards the pleasant land, it's got to come from the north and the west to get to the pleasant land. Okay? Well, what's north and west of Israel? And of the 4 kingdoms that come from Daniel, you're going to actually have 3 of the 4 who have their seats of power to the north and west. You're going to have the Macedonians, and I believe that's Cassander. You're going to have Pergamos, which is Lysimachus, and then you're going to have Antiochus Epiphanes, the Seleucids, which is, they're basically going to rule all over Turkey, but they have Antioch, and then they have Babylon. So you have 3 of the 4. Lysimachus' kingdom is going to submit to the Seleucids, okay, and one of the kings of Pergamum is actually going to help Antiochus Epiphanes get back off of house arrest. Okay, so you're going to have you have basically 2 choices. You're going to have the Antichrist coming from Pergamos, or the Antichrist coming from Macedonia, and it just so happens that the Epistle of Barnabas says that Jesus said that the same legions that tore down the temple are going to rebuild it, and those legions came from Macedonia and Pergamos. Can't make this stuff up. So literally, you have 2 choices of where the Antichrist comes from. Macedon is a separate kingdom again, and obviously Pergamos is part of Turkey. So could he come from Macedon? He could. Definitely could come from Macedon. And if Turkey is seeming like, that would definitely make it all Islamic, and Macedon could be kind of joint. I haven't studied Macedon that much. But suppose some political leader comes from Macedon, and people like this idea because it's not Turk and he's not European, and the Turks and Europeans are both in NATO, but they're not both in the EU. And Macedonia, I believe, is in the EU. So apparently Macedon is not in the EU either. It's a candidate country. And the Macedonians are Orthodox. The second fastest growing religion is Islam. There are Jews, Christians, Protestants, Baptists, and Hindus there. So could the Antichrist be a Macedonian? He certainly could. He certainly could. My money's on Turkey, but he certainly could. And the reason is because he's got to have some substantial armies to do what he does in the Middle East. Turkey has those. Macedon certainly doesn't. But if Macedonia took, authority over a whole EU army because that was better to them than the Turks, let's say they overran the Turks, I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. We'll see. I don't think NATO's going to overrun a NATO member. Let's put it that way. I don't think that's going to happen. But he could. According to this prophecy, he could come from Macedonia. then it says, out of one of them came a little horn that it waxed exceedingly great. It waxed great even to the host of heaven. Okay, so in other words, it extended itself by pouring its armies out towards them. And then it waxed great to the host of heaven. What is it going to do? This kingdom, whatever it's going to do, is literally going to have under its dominion angels. How? Because this beast is going to be a chief angel of Satan. Okay, he's Apollyon from the bottomless pit. This is not Satan, because Satan is not locked in the bottomless pit. This is an angel that is released from the bottomless pit, and he is apparently going to cast some of the hosts of the stars to the ground and stamp on them. Well, Satan actually casts a third of the angels down to the ground. Those are the angels that are under his authority, that they fall with him, and apparently they're all going to be under the authority of this chief angel, Apollyon, the destroyer. Okay? And he is going to stamp on them. Then it says, he magnified himself even to the prince of the hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the host of heaven could be the church, because when we're born again, we're seated in heaven. Because it says the host and of the stars. The host and of the stars. So the stars are the angels, okay? But it says the host, it casts some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground. So this could be the angels going, falling, and this could literally be the Christians, because we're all seated in heaven, so we're part of the host of heaven. This word host just means the masses or the people of heaven, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean, typically the angels are referred to as the heavenly host, but we are going to be like the angels, and we are in Christ, and we're seated in heaven, so it could be us. And then he magnifies himself to the prince of the host, okay? Well, Christ is our prince, okay? And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the daily sacrifice is taken away, okay? So notice he magnifies himself to the prince of hosts, and the daily sacrifice is taken away. Now, this is what's so frustrating to me when people are trying to talk about the daily sacrifice being taken away in Daniel 9 being Christ doing it, okay? Who is literally doing this here? It's very clearly the little horn that's doing it, okay? It's the little horn that's doing it. He magnifies himself even to the prince of the host. What is he saying? He is saying, he's standing up to Christ and saying, I'm the Christ. He's the prince of the host, okay? Christ is Lord of the angels. He's Lord of the church, okay? That's the host and the stars of the ground, and he's saying that he's the prince of the host. He's magnifying himself to the prince of the host. He's saying that he's Christ, okay? He's standing in the temple of God, claiming that he's God, and by him the daily sacrifice is taken away. There's no way you can get this as Jesus doing this, okay? This is him magnifying himself to the prince of the host, okay? And the place of his sanctuary, that's the prince of the host's sanctuary, that's the Holy of Holies, is cast down. The Holy of Holies is where Christ is supposed to sit when he rules and reigns on earth. And he's cast it down. He has defiled it. Okay? And it says, and a host was given to him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. And it cast truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. What is this talking about? It says a host was given to him against the daily sacrifice. Well, let's look at this. A Saba, a mass of persons, was given against this daily sacrifice by reason of the transgression. What do I think this means? I think those people who are going to be given to him to have their heads chopped off for not taking the mark of the beast are those people stupid enough to go offer sacrifices on the Hebrew temple who are Christians. That's what I think that is. I think that transgression, he's saying that the host, let's see if we can find some other interpretations of this. The host was given over to it. Some are going to say to him. Okay, to him or to it. Okay, what are they given over to? He's saying the daily sacrifice together with the burnt offerings. It cast truth to the ground and kept prospering in what it did. Okay, so this is the little horn. So what's going on? Well, it looks like the daily sacrifice is being given over to him. In other words, he's going to make himself out to be the final sacrifice instead of Christ. The host is given over to him. The host is given over to him. Well, what happens? Remember, it says that the saints are going to be given over to him for a time and a half a time. Okay, and it says this is a theory. This is my theory. Is that there's going to be Christians who are in Mystery Babylon because they're going up and they're giving these sacrifices. And because of that, they're not cut off permanently, but they are going to get their heads chopped off for not worshiping the mark of the beast, or for not taking the mark of the beast. They're going to be left behind for this. Okay? And believe you me, I'm going to tell you, when that temple gets erected and they start doing sacrifices in the temple, you're going to find a ton of Christians who are given over to Messianic Judaism and stuff like that now are going to give those sacrifices. They're going to be like, oh, we're doing everything that Jesus did. That's their argument. Oh, do everything that Jesus did. And they're going to go up and give sacrifices on that Temple Mount, and they're going to get their head chopped off for it. That's their penalty. I did everything that Jesus did. Idiots. Idiots. That's the dumbest argument in the world. Don't listen to people doing that. Jesus also was circumcised, and the Bible says if you're circumcised, you're cut off from Christ. Not if you're circumcised, period, but if you're circumcised for religious reasons, you're cut off for Christ. Well, Jesus was circumcised for religious reasons. Think about that. Think about that. I do everything that Jesus did. Jesus did a lot of things that you don't have to do. Okay? Well, Jesus gave sacrifice in the Temple Mount, and so did Paul. That's what they're going to say. These dumb Messianic Hebrew roots people are going to go give their sacrifices at the temple, and they're going to get their heads chopped off for it. Okay? So, he's going to say that and then he said, I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said to a certain saint that spake, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? Okay? Now remember, I told you there's two phases of Jerusalem being trodden underfoot. You have it being trodden underfoot by those who are giving the sacrifices, and then you have it being trodden underfoot by those who are sacking Jerusalem. Okay? So how long before the daily sacrifice, that's the first half of it, and the transgression of desolation, that is going to be the abomination of desolation at the midpoint, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot. Okay? How long is this going to occur? And he's going to say 2,300 days. That's almost the entire 7 years. The reason it stops is because at the seventh bowl, Christ is going to touch down on the Mount of Olives, and he's going to rock that beast. Because you split the Mount of Olives in two, what's going to happen to the Temple Mount? It's probably going to fall down. Okay, you're not going to have anything going on there. Okay, so that's that troddening underfoot. Remember, it starts out as being about the Gentiles all going up to give those sacrifices, and then it's going to end up being with the Gentiles sacking Jerusalem. Then he said to me, 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Okay. So 2,300 days, again, you're going to do the math on that. divide it by 7, you have 328 days. So you see you're shy of 7 years. If we do 360, we're going to see 2,300 divided by 360. That's a prophetic year. You're going to have just shy of 6.5 years. Okay? So you have the last 6 months of the 3.5 years, or it could be the first 6 months while the temple's being built. But it looks like you're going to have 3.5 years of them trampling Jerusalem to give sacrifices while the 2.5 witnesses teach. So you're going to have just shy of that. And I believe that's going to start with Daniel's 70th week, somewhere very shortly after, and it's going to end when Christ touches down on the Mount of Olives and splits the city. That's how long that's going to be. This is not about Antiochus Epiphanes, if that's what you think. This is not about this. Antiochus Epiphanes does not set himself up against God and say, yes, his thing means I am God, but he never stands in the holy place. So then he says, I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall the vision be? And then he's going to tell him it's 2,300 days. And then it said, I came to pass, and I had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning. Behold, there stood before me one as the appearance of the Son of Man. So notice, it starts out with a Nebuchadnezzar having a dream and him interpreting it. Then he has a vision and an angel interprets it. Now he has a vision and an angel is going to interpret it again. Okay? So we don't really get super contentious about what this means, because the angel's going to come in and interpret it for him. And he's going to say, Behold, I will make known to thee the last end of the indignation, for a time appointed it shall be. Okay? Now the indignation is where God is indignant at Israel. This is the whole entirety of their captivity. Okay? The indignation is going to end with Daniel's 70th week ending. So this is the last end of it. That's the 70th week. He hasn't gotten into the 70 weeks prophecy yet, but that's what it is. And he says the ram is Medium Persia. He makes it clear. The rough goat is Greece. Makes it clear. And then he's going to say, now he's going to talk about the Antichrist. He's like, in the latter time of their kingdom. Okay? Now remember, you could say, well, this is Antiochus Epiphanes because he's, the last, king of their kingdom, and this is about him. This is not about the end times. Well, that's a partial fulfillment. But this king of fierce countenance, remember, the Greek, the Roman Empire is a Greco-Roman empire. That's where you're going to find the brass and the iron together. He's established this before he gets to this prophecy, okay? It's a Roman government, but it's a Greek culture, okay? So then when he says their kingdom, the Greeks continue in the Romans, okay? And that's why Babylon is bound by brass and iron, okay? And he says, a king of fierce countenance, harsh, fierce, greedy, power, roughly strong, vehement, presence, base, okay? Understanding, being, it's attending to or considering, shidya, a puzzle, hence, trick, conundrum, sententious, maxim, dark saying, hard question, proverb, riddle, okay? Like QAnon, like Q, shall stand up, okay? So in the latter time, a king, fierce countenance, understanding prophecy, maybe? Well, he's trying to fulfill the prophecies. Dark sentences could be a lot of things. It could be computer code. Could be riddles. Could be the prophecies. I think it's going to be the prophecies. I think it could also be computer code. And then he says, his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So he's going to be power, but somebody's going to help him out. People are going to think, is that Satan? I don't think it is Satan. I think it's AI. And we're going to show you in a later prophecy where the power that's not his own power, it says is going to be this strange God, which his fathers haven't known. Well, there have been people who've worshipped Satan for a long time. So if it's a strange God who his fathers haven't known, maybe it's not. Okay? And he shall destroy wonderfully. And for people who are saying, well, it's the God that the Jews didn't worship. He's not a Jew. He's a Greek. He's a Hebrew. He's a Danite. But he's not a Jew. His fathers. Who is this? Okay? And shall prosper and practice and destroy the mighty and the holy people. The Kadosh, the sacred, the holy people. Okay? He shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Okay? So he's going to subdue 3 kings, and then he's going to go after the holy people. And through his policy, this is intelligence, by implication, success, discretion, knowledge, policy, prudence, he shall cause craft. This is not craft like tradecraft. This is fraud. Okay? That means craftiness, cunning, deceit, falsehood, guile, treachery. Okay? He shall cause treachery to prosper in his hand, and shall magnify himself in his heart, and peace shall destroy many. Okay? So think about, he's a conspiracy guy. Okay? Shall cause conspiracies to prosper and destroy many, and he shall stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Broken without hand. Remember, the rock is cut out without hand. He's broken without hand. Why? The kingdom is not set up by you. Jesus is not made by you. The Antichrist is not defeated by you. Jesus is going to do this, okay? And the vision of the evening and the morning was, which was told, is true. Wherefore thou shut up the vision, and it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted. Okay, that's the third vision. Remember, you have Nebuchadnezzar's, and then you have Daniel's 2 visions. Now, Daniel's going to have 2 more. He's going to have the 70 weeks, and then he's going to have his last one. Then he's going to say, in the first year of Darius the Medes, so the Babylonians have been overthrown. Notice you have 2 sets of 4 kingdoms. So you have 2 witnesses to 4 kingdoms given while the Babylonians are in power. Okay? You have 4 kingdoms given twice. Okay? You have 2 witnesses that there's only 4 kingdoms before the kingdom come. Anyone who tries to finagle that around and tries to make a different 4 kingdoms, he's telling you there are 4 kingdoms prior to the kingdom come. And everybody who's ever interpreted this prior to 9/11 has always said those 4 kingdoms. I mean, everybody. Everybody from Hippolytus of Rome to Sir Isaac Newton has always interpreted those 4 kingdoms to be Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Everybody knows it, okay? So somebody comes up with a novel interpretation in the year 2001, you need to automatically on your face go, I think that's stupid, because why did nobody ever come up with that, okay? They've had the same Bible we've had for all these years, and Islam's been around for 1,400 years by 9/11. Why did nobody ever come up with that interpretation? 1,400 years to come up with that interpretation that the 4th kingdom is Islam, and nobody ever did. Okay? And the answer is because it's bullcrap. So, he says, he stood in his first year, and he wanted to understand the number of years whereof the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolation of Jerusalem. Why does he want to understand the 70 years? Because he is reading into the prophecy and saying this is not just a literal 70 years. Not only that, it's in the first year of Darius, the son of the Medes. The Babylonians have been overthrown. Darius has overthrown them, but Cyrus has not given his decree for the Jews to go back yet. Okay? So we're near the end of this, but it didn't end. Because the prophecies that he gives about the destruction of the king of Babylon seems to be like the Jews' entire captivity is over when the king of Babylon is destroyed. And the king of Babylon's been destroyed. What's going on here? Daniel's trying to figure something out. Okay? Why? Because there's a dual fulfillment. And Daniel knows there's something amiss here. Okay? So Cyrus is going to set them free from Babylon. But the 70 years captivity is not over because they're still under the authority of the Gentiles. Remember, Daniel already knows there's going to be 4 kingdoms before the Antichrist comes. So what is this 70 years? When you've got the 70 years prophecies, when we go into Jeremiah 25, and it's going to say that it shall come to pass when the 70 years are accomplished that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it perpetual desolations. Well, Daniel's here in Babylon, and it's been taken over, and it's certainly not perpetual desolation. So what is going on here? And I will bring into the land all my words which I pronounce against it, even all that is written in the book which Jeremiah prophesied against all the nations. Wait a minute. For many nations and great kings shall serve themselves served themselves of them also, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their hands. Okay? Well, what is going on here? This whole land shall be a desolation and astonishment, and these nations shall serve the kingdom of Babylon 70 years. Okay, well, that's happened. But the perpetual desolations has not happened. Daniel knows something is up here. And we got 29:10. For thus saith the Lord, after 70 years be accomplished in Babylon, I visit you and perform my good word towards you, causing you to return to this place. Well, Babylon's been overthrown, and Jerusalem's not returning to its place yet. That's going to happen soon. Cyrus is going to decree it. It says, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of peace and evil, not evil. Then you shall call upon me, and you shall go and pray to me, and I will hearken to you, and you shall seek me and find me when you search with all your heart. And he said, and I will be found of you, said the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places where I have driven you, said the Lord, and I will bring you back to the place where I caused you to be carried away captive. Well, that is different than a few dozen, it's literally like a few hundred people with Ezra going back to Jerusalem, which Daniel, he might still be alive when that happens. Or no, I'm sorry, he's dead by the time that happens. But what's going on here? This is not the fulfillment which is expected, and Daniel knows that something's up, okay? Babylon has been destroyed. The king of Babylon has been punished, but Babylon's not a desolation. So Daniel's looking at that, and he's going, this is not fulfilled the way I'm reading Jeremiah and expect this thing to be fulfilled. And so he's trying to figure this out, and he set his face toward the Lord to seek by prayer and supplication. What Daniel is thinking is, we've done something wrong. What do we need to do for this to be fulfilled? Are we not repentant enough? And he's begging God, and he's repenting in sackcloth and ashes, and like, what do we got to do? We've sinned, we've committed iniquity, right? And he's going to pray, and God's going to send an angel, and the angel's going to explain dual fulfillment to Daniel. Yes, it's a literal 70 years, and some Jews are going to go back from Babylon after literal 70 years of captivity. Yes, it's that. But it's also this. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Oh, it's also 70 weeks. And upon thy holy city to finish the transgression. Remember, Daniel's already had Nebuchadnezzar's vision and 2 more visions about their transgression extending through 4 kingdoms of Gentiles, okay? So to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make a reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy, okay? Seal up vision and prophecy is going to be your major one, okay? Your dispensationalists are not going to get this, which is why they seal up vision and prophecy after the apostles. Vision and prophecy is not sealed up until Christ returns. And you're going to read this in Zechariah, where he is going to talk about it being illegal to prophesy during the millennium. It's a death sentence if you attempt to prophesy during the millennium, if you attempt to speak in the name of the Lord. Remember, we're going to be ruling and reigning. All the church is going to have perfect knowledge, and the Lord is going to be reigning from Jerusalem. We don't need prophets to know God's will. Anybody who claims prophecy is definitely a liar. Okay? They got delusions of grandeur. They want to be somebody. They've been reading the Bible a little too much and missing the point. Okay? So to seal up vision and prophecy. This is not the prophecies about the first coming of the Messiah. This is all vision and prophecy. It's been fulfilled. We're in the millennium now. The only thing that's left is the end of the millennium that's in the book of Revelation. The prophecies of the millennium are now underway, okay? The lion and the lamb are eating straw like an ox or whatever, and the serpent is a little kid can play with the serpent, and people are living a long time, okay? That's when vision and prophecy is sealed up, because all the prophecies, with the exception of just the end of the 1,000 years, have been fulfilled. There's nothing else to fulfill, okay? Bring in everlasting righteousness. Well, we have 70 weeks for this, okay? And he says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, this is how I've crunched it. I've taken the, okay, again, I have 7 and 62 weeks, okay? The starting point from it is not the decree to build the temple. It's the decree to build Jerusalem, okay? And so that is going to be 444 BC. Okay, so that's your starting point. So if you go 7 weeks times 360 days, and you just go, well, when does he actually decree to build the wall? Okay? And if you go to Nehemiah, this is the whole point of Ezra and Nehemiah being in the Bible, so the Jews could calculate and they could know when they have to start calculating. And Nehemiah is going to fast and he's going to go before the king. This is the whole point of this. This is the last historical book of the Bible, okay? Esther, it looks like, has already happened during Ahasuerus. This is going to be Artaxerxes, though, I believe. And he's going to say, the king is going to tell him, came to pass, look at this, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king. That's very specific. The month of Nisan. When is Nisan? April. It's the month of Nisan. Okay? So it's going to be this is the month of Passover. It's going to be the month of Passover in when is the 20th year of Artaxerxes? Artaxerxes dies in 425 BC. He reigned from 465 BC. 465 BC. Okay? So if he starts his reign in 465 BC, we're going to go 20 years before that. Okay? Now, I can do 444 BC or 445 BC. Okay? It's in the 20th year. So when did his reign start? He starts in August of 465, so it's in the 20th year of his reign, which means the 20th year could be between August 465 and August 445 and August 444. Well, it's in the month of Nisan. It's in the month of Nisan, which is April. So it's in April of the 20th year of his reign, so we know down to the month when this happened, okay? We know this concretely from world history. So down to the month, we have April of 444. It happens, okay? And from April of 444, when I calculate it in, I get 9 weeks from the decree to build the wall times 7. It's going to be 483 years, okay? Times 360 days a year. It's 173,880 total days, according to a 360-day calendar count. Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to divide it by 365.25. So I think I put 364 and a quarter. That's a big deal, okay? And I'm going to get 476. I'm going to take 476, and then I am going to subtract that from 444. And I'm going to get the year 32 and change. Okay, 32 and change. Okay, almost exactly 32. But you know what you don't have? Look at 32 and 0.5 days. Okay, you know what you don't have? A year 0. Okay, you don't have a year 0. So you take out the year 0, and that's going to add you 1 year, and that's 30. That's 33. So you take out the year 0, and this takes you exactly 33 years later. So it's April of the year 33. Okay? It's April of the year 33. It's Nisan of 33. It's telling you exactly when it is. So I just did the math for you guys, and I've never seen anybody else give me a better reason than this, because this is what Daniel says here. He says, from the command to build the wall. That's when Artaxerxes, that's in the year, the month of Nisan, the 20th year of Artaxerxes' reign. That is April of 44 BC. And from April to 44 BC, counting on a 360-day year, that is going to take you exactly to April of 33 AD. If you take out the year 0. There's no year 0. Okay? That's what I get. So you guys come up with a better solution, but that's what I get. So he's telling you that that's when Christ is going to happen. And he's going to say after that, After the 69th week, he's saying after 62 weeks, so that's the 69th week. Remember, from the command to build Jerusalem, not the temple, Jerusalem, 7 weeks and 62 weeks, okay? It's going to take you to 33 AD. So after April of 33 AD, okay, this is April and some change, Messiah will be cut off. So when was Passover on 33 AD? That's when Messiah is cut off. April 3. April 3. The month of Nisan. I don't know what to tell you guys. It's to the day. Okay? He establishes to the day when Christ is going to be cut off. There's no way you can spin this. There's no way you can spin this to get any other formula. Okay? It's to the day, April of 33 AD. I just worked it out for you. So please run this up against all your scholars and your pre-tribbers and your pre-wrathers and your Messiah 2030 people and tell me, how do you get to something different? They're not going to get to something different. Okay? We know that Daniel's counting in 360-day years because we literally have them counting 360-day years in this. Okay? We're going to go to future prophecies in the next prophecy, and he's going to literally be counting in 360-day years. That's how we know. Okay? So he says, he shall confirm a covenant. Listen what he says. After 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not himself. There you go. That's Christ being killed for our sins. And the people of the prince shall come. See, it doesn't have to be right after this. It just has to be after that. Okay? Well, Christ is cut off right after that, and then the prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. This is a major element of Christ prophesying during his ministry. And the end thereof shall be with a flood. To the end of the war, desolations are determined. What is the flood? What is the flood? That's what you want to know. And the end of the war, desolations are determined. I don't hear anybody looking for a flood in 70 AD. Well, it turns out when Satan comes in the second iteration of this, at the end of the war is not over until Satan's defeated, until Christ is ruling and reigning. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Desolations, plural, desolations. So you're going to have the desolation of Jerusalem, 1, and the abomination desolation, 2. 2 desolations. 2 desolations, okay? And so you're going to have the end thereof being with a flood. Well, what's that? Well, remember how Satan spews water like a flood out of his mouth to destroy the woman in the second desolation, after the abomination of desolations, okay? And to the end of the war, desolations are determined. The desolation is not over until the image of the beast is removed and the temple is cleansed, okay? But there's a flood. What is the flood? Well, one of the prophecies that needs to be fulfilled for Antichrist is to make a flow of water flow from Jerusalem to the Mediterranean and to the Dead Sea that turns the Dead Sea into a freshwater lake. That's one of the prophecies that he has to fulfill. He's somehow going to try to do this. And when Israel, this is important, when Israel is fleeing from Jerusalem, he's going to release these waters to try to drown them all. And it says the earth is going to open up and suck up that water and save Israel. So I don't know how he's going to do this. I don't know if he's going to do something to turn, the springs that feed Jerusalem into a gusher. I don't know what he's going to do. I have no idea. But it's going to be something like that. Okay? And then it says, and he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. So notice all this stuff is after. Okay? So you have the end thereof being with a flood. That's second coming. And then the second desolation is second coming. And then he confirms the covenant with many for 1 week. That's second coming. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. We've already established this is not this week. We've already established this is something that the little horn does. Daniel already has this in previous prophecies. Each of these prophecies build on this is one prophet. God is not giving them a bunch of disjointed prophecies that have nothing to do with the ones he's already given them. He's building forward on the previous prophecies. And he says, and for the overspreading of abominations. Now this is important, this word overspreading. Christ gathers us like chicken gathers its wings. That's what this overspreading means. That's why you're going to have interpretations that are going to say on the wing of abomination. Why? Because the Antichrist is going to claim to spread his wings over us like a chicken gathering its hen under his wings, like Christ does. And he is going to claim to be our covering. Okay? This is important. He is going to claim to be our covering in our tabernacle in the place of Christ. And that is the mark of the beast and the image of the beast. That is all about a false Holy Spirit and being in Antichrist instead of in Christ. Okay, and so he's going to say the overspreading of abominations. In other words, he shall make it desolate. Okay? So he is basically going to claim to be Christ and to claim to have you all joined to him for your protection. Against what? He's going to say Jesus is an alien and the rapture was an alien invasion. Okay? And he's going to say he shall make it desolate. What is desolate? He shall make desolate. Okay, the implication is it. It's not an exact word, but it's implied in the Hebrew. Okay, so what is he making desolate? Well, to the end of the war, desolations are determined. Jerusalem is going to be made desolate. He's going to make it desolate even until the consummation. Remember we talked about they're going to consume his kingdom until the end. So that's the end of the 70th week. So Jerusalem is going to be desolate until the consummation is determined, and that determined be poured out. This is the bowls of wrath on the desolate. So you have the abomination of desolation at the midpoint, and then you have the pouring out for the second half of the week. Okay? So I'm just carefully taking you through these prophecies and showing you have to relate the prophecy to the prophecy before it. Okay? But this language, consume and consummation and poured out, is very important. Because when John writes the Revelation, he's going to use words like consume and poured out. Okay? You have to know where these first instances of these words are. So there you go. I've just laid out for you, this definitely takes you, the 69 weeks takes you to April of 33 AD. Okay? I've laid that out for you carefully. The 70th week is in the last days. I've shown you how there's multiple desolations of Jerusalem. There's 70 AD, and then there's in the last days. Desolations too. Okay? Just like these kings, you have to pay attention to singular and plural. That's how we get the third heaven. God created the heavens, plural, and then the earth, and then he creates another heaven. After that, with the sky, you have three heavens. That's why the Jews know their third heaven. Singular and plural means something. You can't just take the word heavens and say that means outer space. No, it's plural heavens. It's the third heaven where the angels dwell, and it's the second heaven where the stars dwell. And then the first heaven is the sky, where the birds dwell. There's three heavens. Okay? There's not seven heavens, nor are there just general multiple heavens. Okay? Just like there's multiple desolations. When he says desolations, there's got to be at least two desolations of Jerusalem, which means it has to be rebuilt and desolated again. The temple has to be rebuilt and destroyed again. Okay? So that's Daniel 9. Now we're going to get down to the last prophecy. And the last prophecy is going to take you very carefully. Remember how the Daniel 8 takes you from the Greeks in a type of abomination of desolation with Antiochus Epiphanes forward into the last days. Okay? Well, this is going to do that again. These prophecies are stacked on top of each other. And he's going to take you through the history. He's in mourning. He is going to be have his face to the ground. He's going to try to understand all the crazy visions he's had. And then this guy's going to show up and he's going to say, "Fear not, Daniel, from the first day thou didst set your heart to understand and chasten thyself before God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words." Okay? But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 20 days. So he's going to start to lay out stuff here. The prince of the kingdom of Persia. Oh, so there's a kingdom of Persia and it has an angelic prince over it that withstood this angel? Yup. It wasn't a man that was withstanding him. It was an angelic prince. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes. So we know there's archangels. There's chief princes, okay? And Michael is one of them. Came to help me, okay? He's the only one specifically called an archangel in the Bible, okay? But he's called here one of the chief princes, so we know he's not the only one, okay? And it just so happens people can infer from that Satan's one of them and a third of them follow him, and they think the third is Gabriel. I don't know if the third is Gabriel. Maybe it is. Maybe he's just a messenger. If he's an archangel, I don't get why the prince of Persia was able to stand up to him and he needed Michael's help. So I don't think Gabriel's an archangel. Maybe he is. Who knows? And then he says, Michael came to help me and remained there, and I remained there with the kings of Persia. The kings of Persia. Okay? So he's saying he came and remained with the kings of Persia. And he says, now I have come to make you understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet is the vision for many days. These latter days are not talking about 70 AD. Okay, this is the latter days. This is the end of the captivity of Israel. He says, and when he had spoken such words to me, I set my face towards the ground and became dumb. And I became like the similitude of, and behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips. And I opened my mouth and I spake and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. Okay? So this one like the similitude of the sons of men touches him, and he says, O my Lord. Now, they're going to call angels lords. Okay? So don't assume this is Jesus, but maybe it is. Okay? For how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remain no strength in me, neither is there breath left in me. Okay? So there's already multiple angels here. There's the angel that's delivering the vision. That can't be Jesus, because the prince, how's the prince of Persia withstanding Jesus? Sorry, no, Jesus is not that weak, ever, especially in his pre-incarnate sense. Okay? Jesus doesn't need Michael's help. Okay, but now we have one like the Son of Man who touches his lips, and he's retained no strength, and he's saying, how can I talk to one like you? Okay? Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. So notice he said one like one of the sons of men, and then one in the appearance like a man. So one like the similitude of the sons of men, and then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man. So there's multiple angels here. Okay? There's two angels here. Now there's a third. And he's going to say, O man, greatly beloved, fear not, peace be unto thee, and strong, yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened me. So could this Lord be Jesus? It could be. Or he could just be referring to the angel as the Lord, okay? Because different angels are referred to as the Lord, okay? So now we know there's three angels here. There's three angels here giving the vision. There's the one who came to give him the vision, and then there's the one that stood up and strengthened him, or stood up and touched his lips, but he retained no strength, and then the other one that touched him and strengthened him. There's three angels present, okay? And then he says, then said he, so this is going to be, looks like the third one, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee, and now will I return and fight with the prince of Persia, okay? And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Greece shall come. Okay? Now, who is this one? Well, first you have the angel who's sent to strengthen him, and he said he remained with the princes of Greece. Okay? And then there's the angel that comes and touches his lips, and he opens his mouth and spoke, and he stood before him, but he retained no strength. And then there is one who comes and says, peace be unto him, and when he spoken to him, he was strengthened. Okay? So there's three angels here. And the third angel is going to say to him, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? He's asking him a question. And now will I fight with the prince of Persia, and when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Greece will come. Okay? So whoever this angel is who just strengthened him is going to go fight with the kings of Persia. And he said, and I will show thee that which is noted in the scripture of truth, and this is important, and there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael your prince. Okay? This third angel, I think, is the angel of the Lord. Okay? You have the angel who's delivering the message, which could be Gabriel. You have, because Gabriel's always delivering a message. That's why I think that's Gabriel. He's not named Gabriel here, but he's named Gabriel in other prophecies. Okay? And then you have the angel who touches him so that he can speak, and then the angel that strengthens him. And it's that one who he calls my Lord. Okay? So maybe there's two angels, and he's just saying one like the appearance of man and one like the similitude of the sons of man. Maybe that's the same angels. And he says, and then there came again and touched me like the appearance of a man. So maybe that's the one angel, that's the second angel. But the point is it's not the first angel. And he's calling that one my Lord. Okay? And he's saying that angel is saying that I will return and fight with the prince of Persia, and that the only one that holds with him in these things is Michael, your prince. This word holds means shazak, to fasten upon, hence seize, be strong, obstinate, to bind, restrain, conquer, confirm, constant, constrain. He's the restrainer. He knows who restrains him. He says, the only one who restrains with me. In other words, he is literally making boundaries for kingdoms. You can do this, but you can't do that. He's binding and loosing angelic princes. Okay? And he says, this is the one who Daniel calls my Lord, and the one who he calls my Lord. Remember, he's not named Gabriel. Okay? There's another angel who was sent to him, but needed Michael's help. And then he remained with the princes of the people. That's the first one who's talking to him. And then this one comes and strengthens Daniel. And he is saying that the only one who restrains with him is Michael the prince. So it looks like this is Jesus saying, my number 2, my military guy, the head of my armies, is Michael. And he acts as a restrainer in the earth. Okay? And then the same guy is going to say, and I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and strengthen him. So the same angel who strengthens Daniel, because remember, one has touched his lips, but he has no strength. And then the one who comes and strengthens him says, I'm the one who strengthened Darius. Okay? So who strengthened Darius the Mede? Jesus. Jesus made Darius the Mede strong and able to go overthrow Babylon. Okay? And he says, and now, remember, this angel is over the rising and falling of these 4 kingdoms, okay? This angel, and this is the angel of the Lord, I believe, okay? And then he says, and now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. So he's telling him how many kings there are in Persia before the end. And a 4th will be far richer than they all, and by his strength and his riches he will stir up against the entire realm of Grecia. That's going to be Artaxerxes. It's going to be Sparta, okay? And the mighty king shall stand up, and he shall rule with great dominion, and shall do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven. So there's Alexander, there's Alexander's 4 generals, and not to his posterity. Now, we know this is Alexander's 4 generals because this is the 3rd prophecy this is in now. Okay? I'm sorry, this is the 2nd prophecy this is in, okay? It's in it's in Daniel 8. And then you have, you have the 4 beasts, which are going to have the 4 heads of the 4 leopards and the 4 wings. And then you have these 4 kingdoms divide towards the 4 wind of heavens. So you have 3 different witnesses that Alexander's kingdom is divided into 4 parts. Okay? Joel Richardson's going to try to tell you that that's not the case. I don't know how many ways the Bible needs to say it. This was always interpreted as the division of Alexander's empire by 4 generals. Okay? And then he says, the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes shall be strong above him and have dominion. Now, I don't have time to get into all this, but if you go get Josephus and you line this up with the history that descends from Alexander the Great down to Antiochus Epiphanes, this is a perfect match. Okay? And here's where it stops being about Antiochus Epiphanes. He is going to say that then he shall return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits and return to his own land. At the time appointed he shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. Okay? This is an important line in this prophecy. He shall return and come towards the south, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So Antiochus Epiphanes has had returns like this before, but there's going to be a latter return. And this one is not going to be like this. This is still talking about Antiochus Epiphanes. For the ships of Chittim will come against him. This is when Rome shows up and draws a circle around him and says, they punk him out and say, you step out of the circle without declaring that you will withdraw from trying to invade Egypt, or Rome's going to declare war on you. And he's going to be punked. And he's going to say, fine, I won't declare war on Egypt, okay? Therefore he shall be grieved in return and have indignation against the Holy Covenant. He's going to go back to Jerusalem. And he is going to kill a bunch of Jews because the Jews tried to overthrow him. They had heard that he was dead, and they tried to overthrow his governors in Jerusalem, okay? And then he shall return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant, okay? So there's those who keep the covenant and those who forsake the Holy Covenant, okay? There's Hellenist Jews, and then there's religious Jews, okay? And he is going to have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Now, this stuff, notice he says that not as the former as the latter. A lot of this stuff is going to repeat itself in the last days. You're going to have Jews who keep the covenant, and then you're going to have secular Jews, okay? You had the same thing back in Antiochus' day. And then it's going to say, and arms shall stand on his part. So let's see what arms are. Zorah. He's going to say the arm, the foreleg, figuratively arm, help, mighty, power, shoulder, strength, force. Okay? So he's going to say the strong of the Jews. Remember, you're going to have those that forsake and those that keep, but the stronger are going to stand on his part and pollute the sanctuary of strength. And they shall take away the daily sacrifice and shall place there the abomination that makes desolate. Okay? So this is Antiochus' abomination of desolation, but this is going to repeat itself in the days of the Antichrist. Remember, there's going to be multiple desolations. And then he says, and such as do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt by flatteries. I'm going to make the Jews great again. Okay? But the people who know their God. Okay? Notice he's going to say, such as do wickedly against the covenant. Okay? Now this is important. The Holy Covenant. Back in the day, there's a reason why it's called the Holy Covenant. Okay? Back when he does this, when Antiochus Epiphanes does this, there's only the Old Covenant. So there's the Holy Covenant. But there's only one time in the entire Bible where a covenant is called the Holy Covenant. And that's going to be when John the Baptist's dad, Zechariah, is going to look at this. John the Baptist's dad, Zechariah, in Luke 1, is going to tell them, now look at all these. You never have the words Holy Covenant together, except in Daniel 11 and in Luke 1:72. Okay? And this is when he says about John the Baptist and says, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has visited and redeemed his people and has raised up a horn of salvation in his house for his servant David. This is Jesus. And he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us, to perform the mercy promised to our fathers. This is not the Mosaic covenant. This is the promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to remember his holy covenant. Okay? The holy covenant is the covenant he made with Abraham, which is in the new covenant. Okay? So he is going to have intelligence with them. Now remember, back with Antiochus Epiphanes, when it says Antiochus Epiphanes, he's going to be against the Holy Covenant. You need to understand the Holy Covenant. Back in the first fulfillment, that was the Mosaic Covenant to them. Okay, but it's really in the fuller fulfillment is the New Covenant. So he's going to be against the Holy Covenant, and the Jews that are against the Holy Covenant are going to be his allies in this, the religious Jews. Okay, and the secular Jews. And he's going to do exploits and return to his own land. And then it says, at the appointed time he shall return and come towards the south. Okay? And he's going to say, those that do wickedly against the covenant, he shall corrupt by flatteries. Okay? So he's not just saying, so when he says do wickedly, rasha, condemn, make trouble, vex, okay? Trouble. This is important. This is the tribulation of the saints, okay? This is the first half of Daniel's 70th week. So those who do wickedly against the covenant, those who trouble the covenant people, that's the church, he's going to corrupt with flatteries. Who are those? Those are the false teachers. Those are the false prophets and false Christs that arise to point everybody to Antichrist. Those are going to be your Joel Richardsons. Those are going, unless he repents, those are going to be your Lance Wallnows. Those are going to be your Kevin Copelands. Those are going to be all those people who are going to want their fame and popularity, and they're going to want their place. They're the birds that nest in Mystery Babylon, the wicked, and they're going to submit to the Antichrist. They're going to toe his line, and he's going to corrupt them with flatteries. I'll make you rich. I'll make you powerful. We're going to make the church great again, and we're going to have Chrislam, and we're going to have all this stuff. And he says, but the people who know their God shall be strong, and notice it says do exploits, okay? So let's see what this says. He says, the people that know Elohim shall be Shazak. Okay, they're going to seize, they're going to be strong, they're going to constrain, and they're going to do, make, advance, accomplish, appoint, bear, bring forth. They're going to bear fruit. Okay? Through this trouble, they're going to bear fruit while he's going to corrupt these other wicked ones. Okay? And it says, and when they fall, they shall be holpen, protected, aided, succored, with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. What is he going to talk to you about? He's going to say, there are going to be those who help the church through this time, but many of them are going to cleave to them by flatteries. What is going to happen here? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen here. You're going to make Christendom 2.0 and come join with us to fight against the Antichrist, and we can join the kings of the East and fight against the Antichrist, and then we'll all have a place at the table, your Islamic state and your Christian states, and we'll have a new world order, and get rid of this Antichrist world order, and then we'll let America be a Christian nation, and you can join with us, and we'll let Britain be a Christian nation, and you can join with us against the kings of the East. That's how they're going to be helping with flatteries, okay? You don't want to be caught up in that. And he's going to say, and some of understanding shall fall to try them, to refine them and purge them and make them white. Why? Because people like me who are going to say, this is not of God either, we're going to get killed too. Why? Well, you're either with the Antichrist or you're with the kings of the East. You have to pick a side. You're either red team or blue team. You can't say you're both wrong. How dare you? We're going to kill those guys. And when those people get killed, people who know their God are going to be like, hey, that dude stands with Jesus and he got killed by Christendom 2.0. That's how we know. Don't follow Christendom 2.0. And that's how they're going to be purged and made white, even to the time of the end, because it is for a time yet appointed. Okay? Now, we're still in the first half of Daniel's 70th week here. He says, the king will do according to his will, and it will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. Now we're at the abomination of desolations. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above them all. Now we're at the abomination of desolation. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and the God whom his fathers knew not. So notice he says in his estate. In his stand, a pedestal, or station, base, estate, foot, office, place. Well, he shall honor the God of forces. Why? Who is going to receive his estate? The image of the beast. That's who. Okay, that's the God of forces. That's AI. That's what I believe. And he shall honor with gold, silver, and precious stones and pleasant things. This is what I think it's going to be. I think the image of the beast is going to look like the angel of Ezekiel, where it talks about the gold and the timbrels and all that stuff. And I think he's going to make something like that. And that's what he's going to go into after he dies. Okay? Or in terms of his digital avatar or whatever. And then it says, thus shall he do with the most strong holds. Okay? The strongest fortifications with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule, over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Who is he causing to rule over many? those who forsake the covenant, those who act wickedly against the covenant. So who's going to rule over many? The Jews and the false Christians, Chrislam, okay? And divide the land for gain. He's going to divide the earth, and he's going to divide Israel for his own gain, okay? At the time of the end shall the king of the south, so that now remember Jesus is going to say, this is not yet the end, and when the abomination of desolation happens, this is the end, okay? So it's telling you here's what he's going to do. And now it's going to say, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall push on him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and overflow and pass over, okay? The Eretz, the lands, okay? So the lands he's going to enter and overflow is going to be the Middle East, and it's going to tell you where he's going to take. And he shall enter into the glorious land, and many shall be overthrown, okay? So he's saying many shall be, countries shall be overthrown. And these shall escape out of his hand, Edom, Moab, and chief of the princes of Ammon. Okay, so Jordan is not going to be taken by him. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon his enemies. This is important because Jordan is where the Jews are going to flee. Okay, that's where Basra is. Okay, and he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries of the land of Egypt, also upon the lands of the land of Egypt, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. Okay? He shall have powers over the treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. So apparently Egypt is going to be rich by this point. Why? And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Some say follow at his heels, follow in his train. It looks like the Libyans and the Ethiopians are going to be subdued by him, okay? Or it could be he's getting ready to invade them, okay? But it looks like he's going to subdue them after he takes Egypt, okay? So he's basically going to control all the oil. Ethiopia's got those massive electric dams. He's going to basically have a lock, and it looks like these are going to be the kingdoms. This is going to be North Africa. This is going to be sub-Saharan Africa, and he's got the Middle East, okay? And then it says, but reports from the east and the north shall alarm him. What's this? It's the Battle of Armageddon. The others are going to come against him, okay? So the east and the north, okay? Now what's going to happen? The king of the north is going to come against him, and I believe that is going to be a British-led coalition. It could encompass all of NATO, or it could just be Britain and Scandinavia and Canada and the northern, and maybe even like the remnants of the U.S. Navy after World War III. But I think it's going to be a British-led thing, and it's then it's going to be the East. That's going to be the kings of the East. So you're going to have China and Persia, maybe the remnants of Russia that's left over, and probably some kind. I think Persia's going to reestablish and take over Pakistan and Afghanistan and all of them. I think Iran's going to take over all of that. And then maybe India is going to be with him. Who knows? And it's going to say he's going to pitch his... He shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas, plural, and the glorious holy mountain. Where are the seas? That's going to be the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. Those are the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Okay? So you have the Mediterranean Sea to the south, the Mediterranean Sea to the west, you have the Red Sea to the south, and you have Jerusalem to the northeast, which means he's going to be southwest of them. He's going to be in the Gaza Valley. That's where he's going to set up his armies. Okay? So this is going to be in Philistia. He is going to appear to have the reinforcements of possibly Europe and Libya behind his back, and he is going to fight against the kings of the east and also the kings of the north, who are just going to come against him with many ships. Okay? It's the ships of Kittim. And then but it says, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Why? Because he's going to go up in Jerusalem, sit in the temple, claiming he's God, and Jesus is going to appear and shoot him down with a bolt of lightning. That's why. Okay? This is the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week this is taking you to. Then he says, and at that time Michael the prince shall stand up, which stands for the children of people, and it shall be a time of great trouble, such has never been since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Okay? What is he telling you? He's telling you there's going to be a resurrection at this time. everyone who is found written in the book shall be delivered. Okay? Everyone who is found written in the book. That includes the people who get their heads chopped off. So they're going to get their heads chopped off pretty quickly. And I am going to suggest to you, it's after the seventh trumpet, but before the bowls get poured out. Because you're going to see these people in Revelation 15 in heaven. Okay? They're delivered through death, but they're delivered. And the rest are raptured. Okay? Everyone who is found written in the book is going to be delivered. And then the righteous of Israel, they're going to be delivered because they're going to flee to Basra. Okay? So you're going to have them being delivered. And it's going to say, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life and some to shame and contempt. Okay? That's when the resurrection, the rapture happens. When you have people raising to life, that's the resurrection. Okay? And he's going to say, some to everlasting life, some to shame and contempt. Okay? He's gapping the 1,000 years here. He's not going to say it, but this is when it begins. At that time when Michael stands up. Well, what happens in Revelation 12? Michael casts Satan out of heaven. Okay? This word stand up means, or can mean arise. So at that time, Michael will arise, the great prince that stands for the children of your people. He's the one who restrains with Jesus. Okay? And he throws Satan down to the earth. Or it just says, and Satan was cast down to the earth. He's going to prevail against Satan's angels. I don't know if it's actually him that does it. It could be Jesus. But he's going to go down. At the same time, a bolt of lightning is going to strike the Antichrist. Okay? And it says, they that shall be wise shall shine in the brightness of the firmament. So remember, the wise shall instruct many. Okay? They that shall be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament. What does he talk about? You're going to shine like stars. And this is what Paul is going to emphasize in 1 Corinthians 15. Just like Jesus in his glorified body was brighter than the sun, we're going to be like that. And then we're going to get caught up like that. So we're going to be like a bunch of shooting stars going up to the New Jerusalem. And they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. We're going to be like that forever after. He is describing the resurrection and the rapture to you. Anyone who tells you the resurrection and the rapture is not in the Old Testament is lying to you. The resurrection and the rapture is right here. Okay? And when is that? Well, when does this happen? When Revelation 11, he's going to say, when they blow the seventh trumpet, now is the time to judge the dead. Okay? And this is when the people are delivered that sleep in the dust who's written in the book. Now is the time to judge the dead. And that's when they're going to resurrect the righteous saints. And then he says, so that's the end. This is where he leads it up to. He leads it up to the rapture. Okay? And then he's going to stop. And he's going to say, but thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal it in the book, for it is even until the time to the end, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Okay? So he's going to say, in the end, people are going to go to and fro, and knowledge will be increased. That's happening right now. World travel and the internet has increased knowledge in the earth. That is going to be the end. That's the time of the end. You can almost translate this, oh, Daniel, shut up the words in the book, seal the book even till the time of the end, when many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. You could insert when. Okay? Then Daniel looked, and behold, there stood other two. Remember, there's 3 angels total. Okay? The other 2, one on this side of the river and the other on the other side. So there's 3 angels total in this situation. Michael's just talked about. He's not here. You have 3 angels here. And one just talked to him, and he's looking at the other 2. And he said, one says to the man clothed in linen, which was on the other side of the waters, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? Okay? These wonders. Everything he just described, which leads you up to the middle of Daniel's 70th week and Michael casting Satan out of heaven, it leads you up to Revelation 12. He's saying, how long will it be to the end of these wonders that were just described? Okay? And he said, and I heard a man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left unto heaven, and swear by him that lives forever and ever. This is exactly what the angel does in Revelation 10. Okay? He holds up one hand and swears by him that lives forever and ever. And this angel is holding 2 hands up and swears by him forever and ever. He's saying, how long till the end of these wonders? Okay? And he's going like this long. And he's swearing by heaven, it shall be a time, times and a half. And when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. Okay? When does he accomplish to scatter the power of the holy people? When the Jews flee Jerusalem, the Christians are all have their heads chopped off, and the rapture occurs. The power of the holy people has been scattered. There's nobody opposing him in the earth at this point, except for the wicked, the kings of the east, and the fake Christians, and the Christendom 2.0 people. Okay, that's when this will be finished. Okay. Then he says, "And I heard and understand not. Then I said, O Lord, what shall be the end of these things?" So this is another question. Okay. So this is when all the stuff in his vision ends, after 3.5 years. This is the midpoint in the tribulation. That's when he just took you to. And then he said, when will be the ends of these things? And he said, Daniel, he said, go thy way, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. This "and" could be then. Then from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So that's 1,290 days. So how long is 1,290 days? 1,290. And yes, we will be counting in 360-day years by that time, possibly literally as like this. We're gonna have a massive worldwide earthquake and a pole shift. So it could be literal 360-day years at that point, but we're counting by the days because that's what God says to do, okay? So 1,290 divided by 360-day years. If these are 360-day years, it's 3.5 years and change, okay? And if we're going to do 1,290 divided by 365-day years, in literal years, 3.5 years. It's 3.5 years, okay? So you're going to have 3.5 years from the abomination of desolation, the sacrifice taken away. Notice the sacrifice being taken away is the abomination of desolation. Okay? This is not Christ doing this, because Christ doesn't set up the abomination that makes desolate. It's set up. It's stood up in the holy place. Okay? When the image of the beast is set up, there's going to be 1,290 days. There's going to be 3.5 years of that. And he says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to 1,335 days. That's 45 days later. Why? But go thy way till the end, for it shall be shall rest, and shall stand in thy lot for the end of the days. Why? Because after Jesus takes the abomination of desolation out of the temple, 45 days is probably how long it takes to cleanse the temple. By that time, Jesus is destroying all these armies. And if you survive this, blessed are you. Blessed are you if you survive this. Because you get to live under the reign of Messiah. Okay? That's it. That's how it ends. So he's very expressly telling you that abomination of desolation is in the middle of the 70th week. He's very expressly telling you that the rapture is in the middle of the 70th week. That's all in Daniel. I will debate anyone on this subject, and I will show them that they're wrong. I would rather not debate them. I'd rather educate them. But if they want to have a debate so I can educate them, I'll do that. Okay? But I just laid out to you how from the command to build the temple or the wall of Jerusalem to the Messiah takes you right to 33 AD. 2,000 years after that is 2033 AD. So Messiah 2030 is out. Okay, it doesn't work any way you spin it with the timelines. Okay, I just told you it's at Mid-Trib, and this is all in Daniel. I just showed you two Roman empires, or two iterations of the same Roman Empire. It's all in Daniel. Okay, so that gets rid of your pre-wrath. That gets rid of your Islamic Antichrist. That gets rid of your pre-trib. That gets rid of your preterism. They're all out just by studying Daniel. Do you think I know Daniel better than Paul knew Daniel? Paul is going to break it down to 3 points that he's going to make in 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, and 1 Corinthians 15. 3 points. It's going to sum up everything I just told you. At the seventh trump, or the last trump, we're going to shine like stars. That's in 1 Corinthians. Before that, he's going to have 1 and 2 Thessalonians. One is going to be It will not take you like a thief. That's First Thessalonians. It will not take you like a thief if you're in Christ and you're watching. And 2, in 2 Corinthians, it's going to say it will not happen until the abomination of desolation. Everything I just told you, Paul is going to sum up in 3 points, in 3 different letters, and that's going to be his entire eschatology. And then John is going to lay that all out in the book of Revelation. So if you guys have any questions or challenges to this, bring it. I will. If somebody tells me, go fight with one hand tied behind your back, okay, I will only use Daniel. I'm going to land on Mid-Trib Rapture in the middle of Daniel's 70th week. And no later, or no earlier than 33 AD. That's how I'm going to stand up to all the false eschatology buffs out there. Okay? So that's it. That's Daniel. The next one I'm going to take you into Paul, and then I'm going to take you into the book of Revelation. Paul's is going to be short and sweet. He only writes three letters that talk about eschatology, and his points are short and sweet. Okay? But Luke is going to give Christ's version of eschatology for Paul. So hope you guys have been blessed by this, and enjoy the rest of your day. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.